Before meeting Janet, I led a relatively independent and satisfying life. My late 20s were a time of career progress and increasing stability. I had always imagined settling down with the right person, but I wasn't in a hurry. After several relationships, I started to understand that real companionship wasn't just about compatibility, but about building a purposeful life together. During one of those reflective periods, Janet came into my life. Meeting her changed my priorities almost immediately. She had a magnetic presence that made me feel like we could achieve anything together. Before long, we were planning for the future, marriage, and hopefully starting a family. We both envisioned a life based on stability, mutual understanding, and a commitment to support each other through all challenges. Janet and I got married later than most, with me being 28 and her 31. That was 6 years ago. Before we met, we had each fully enjoyed our youthful freedom, but that left us without much financial security when we finally started our life together. Before the wedding, we discussed our desire to have kids and our plan for Janet to stay home with them until the youngest reached school age. We both felt strongly that having a stay-at-home parent was important for a child's development, provided we could afford it. This gave us time to save money before expanding our family. Janet worked full-time while I took every overtime shift I could, often doubling up on Fridays and working long hours on Saturdays. Our hard work was paying off. We now owned our home outright, and our savings were growing. Recent conversations suggested that kids were likely soon, hopefully before Janet turned 40, as the chances of having our first child would decrease after that. That's why the conversation we had this Thursday night felt so unreal. "Kurt, I want to talk about a trial separation," she said. My mind went blank. "What?" I blurted out in disbelief. If you've ever been on the receiving end of a breakup, you know the feeling. The other person seems to have it all figured out while you're left blindsided and unprepared. That was me at that moment. "Why?" I managed to ask, still trying to process what she was saying. "I just think we need some time apart to rediscover ourselves and appreciate each other again," she explained. "Let's be honest, Kurt. You're not as romantic as you used to be, and you seem to take me for granted. You always say you're too tired to go out. Our closeness has declined, and to be honest, you've gained some weight. Don't you think a break could help us?" I was speechless, struggling to absorb her words and the suddenness of it all. Had I been more composed, I might have noticed the subtle shift from us to me in her words, but at that moment, it completely escaped me. "How about we take a month, Kurt?" she suggested. "Then we can reassess. I'll stay at Wendy's. You can call me whenever, but let's limit our in-person meetings to once a week. Any more than that, and it won't feel like a real separation, will it? Just know, Kurt, that I love you deeply and believe we'll have beautiful children together. I'm confident that after a month, maybe 2 at most, we'll be back to where we were." With that, Janet stood, grabbed 2 suitcases from the hallway, and headed for the door. "Don't I get a say in this, Janet?" I stammered. "My decision is made, Kurt," she said firmly. "Please sit down, Janet," I pleaded. Reluctantly, she sat down again. "Who is he, Janet?" I couldn't help but ask. "Oh, Kurt, I knew you'd jump to that conclusion," she sighed. "I love you, Kurt, and only you. There's no one else, so there's no need to check my phone, follow me, put a GPS tracker in my car, or hire a private investigator. In fact, if you did any of those things, I'd see it as a lack of trust, and we'd have to reconsider our relationship." As she moved to stand up again, I instinctively grabbed her arm and pulled her back. "This isn't fair, Janet. You've had days, maybe weeks, to plan this out and make your speech." "But it's all new to me," I said, frustration creeping into my voice. "What move, Kurt?" she asked, finally reflecting some of the confusion I was feeling. "Don't you see that what you've done risks our relationship? Janet, this one-sided decision feels disrespectful. I've always treated you as my equal, and I'd never make such a risky move without discussing it with you first." "What risk, Kurt? I love you and you love me. Where's the damage in a short break? If I miss you before the month is up, I'll come back in an instant." "And what do you mean by contempt?" she asked, her tone now curious and concerned. "I mean, you haven't given me a chance to explain myself," I replied. "For example, we don't go out much because I've been working overtime on Fridays and Saturdays. We agreed to those extra hours to improve our finances. Our closeness has faded, partly because of the natural evolution of a 6-year marriage, and partly because I'm always exhausted. As for my weight, it's because you suggested I take on the supervisor role for extra pay, which isn't as physically demanding. Those are just my initial thoughts in the last 2 minutes. Can't you stay so we can talk this through properly?" "I'm sorry, Kurt. I promised Wendy I'd go out with her tonight," she said softly but firmly. With that, she stood, picked up her bags, and walked toward the door. All I could say was, "Just remember, Janet, you're still married." She paused briefly, but then continued out the door without looking back. That night, I couldn't fall asleep, leaving me exhausted and unprepared for the grueling 16-hour shift the next day. Despite my fatigue, I couldn't change plans. The afternoon shift supervisor had already made arrangements, counting on my promise to cover for him again. In my line of work, letting your guard down was never an option. So there I was on Friday night, in the wrong place at the wrong time, nearly being run over by a 35-ton loader. I barely managed to jump out of the way at the last second, feeling the heat of the exhaust as I touched the ground. Adrenaline kept me going through the rest of the shift, heightened by hunger. Since Thursday, Janet's usual grocery run had been skipped because she was busy packing. The next day, I was back at work by 10 a.m., surviving on sandwiches made from stale bread. The following night, I stopped by a 24-hour corner store to pick up supplies. When I got home after 11:30 p.m., I saw the message light blinking on the phone. It was Janet, telling me she missed me and thanking me for giving her space by not calling. She mentioned she'd be out late again that night and asked me not to call, which left me feeling more resentful. Here I was, working myself to the bone to contribute 3 times as much to our savings, while she seemed to be enjoying herself without a care. It was a bitter feeling, one I hadn't experienced before. Neither of us reached out on Sunday. By Monday, I decided to tell my boss I wouldn't be available for overtime for the time being. When he asked why, I told him about the near accident on Friday night, and he looked surprised and quickly agreed with my decision. By Wednesday, with no contact from Janet, she finally called. It didn't seem like she had much to say. Feeling a bit guilty for ignoring her, I decided to make things right. On Thursday evening after dinner, I headed to Wendy's house with a bouquet of flowers and a box of chocolates as a peace offering. Wendy, Janet's best friend who had been divorced for over a year, welcomed me in. I never knew the real reason for her divorce, but I had my suspicions. She said Janet was in the shower and invited me to wait on the couch. As I sat, Wendy moved closer to me, making me uncomfortable. I shifted away subtly, but she persisted. Thankfully, Janet appeared just then. I gave her the flowers and chocolates, but our conversation was awkward and lacked the ease we usually shared. After some small talk, Janet asked, "Was there something you wanted, Kurt?" Her question caught me off guard. "No, I just came by to ask my wife out on a date tomorrow night," I said. "I'm sorry, Wendy and I already have plans," Janet replied. "Wait, tomorrow is Friday. You usually work on Friday nights," I pointed out. "Not anymore. I quit," I admitted. "But what about the money?" she asked, clearly concerned. "I've decided to prioritize my marriage and my health," I said, looking her in the eye. "With the extra responsibilities of cooking, cleaning, and working full-time, I've been more exhausted than ever. When you left me that message last Saturday night about going out, I realized I was pushing myself too hard. Last Friday, I was so tired that I almost had a serious accident at work." Janet's expression shifted to shock, and she hugged me. "Please be careful," she whispered. "I'll need you in a few months." The moment was interrupted when Wendy returned to the room, ending the conversation abruptly. "Sorry to rush you, Kurt, but we have a Tupperware party starting soon," Wendy announced. Taking the hint, I left quickly. Some things a man just shouldn't stick around for. Janet walked me to the door, and in desperation, I asked, "Please come home, Janet. I miss you." "Give it 3 more weeks, Kurt. We'll talk then," she said, visibly uncomfortable. Any hope I felt vanished when she added, "Take a break from overtime for a month and rest up. We'll need the extra money, Kurt." I glanced at the flowers and chocolates she'd tossed aside and left without another word. Over the next week, Janet called twice, disappointed that I hadn't reached out. I tried to explain that between working full-time, cooking, and going to the gym, I had little time left, but she didn't seem to get it. The next week, I stopped by on Tuesday night. Again, Janet was in the shower when I arrived. This time, I avoided the couch, recalling the discomfort from my last visit. Wendy, dressed to the nines, stood too close for comfort, making me uneasy. When Janet finally came downstairs, also dressed up, she seemed a bit uncomfortable as she explained, I should have called first. Had I done so, I would have known they were going out. Feeling embarrassed, I was quickly ushered out, and as the door closed behind me, I thought I heard giggles. I vowed that would be the last time I let myself feel humiliated. Neither of us reached out for the rest of the week. The following Sunday, I was in the backyard lifting weights I had made myself. I could feel my strength returning. Suddenly, I felt arms wrap around me from behind and someone press against my back. It was the first human contact I'd had in over 2 weeks, and I welcomed it, until I heard Wendy's voice whisper in my ear. "Sorry, handsome. I couldn't resist," she murmured. Shocked, I quickly pulled away and turned around, trying to hide my discomfort. I offered her coffee and couldn't help but notice her outfit, which, though typical for her, showcased an ample amount of cleavage. I made sure to sit at the far end of the kitchen table to create some distance, but Wendy dragged her chair right beside mine, so close our legs were touching. We engaged in awkward small talk, a skill I had never mastered. "Are you going to ask how Janet's doing?" Wendy inquired. "No," I responded firmly. "She made it clear that's none of my business." Wendy's smile widened. "She's a little upset, you know. She thought you'd be begging and groveling by now." "Sorry, Wendy, that's not my style," I replied. "I asked her out on a date when I first came here, and she turned me down, saying she already had plans. She never bothered to reschedule. I don't know what this separation is about, so I'm just going to wait and see if she comes back or if our marriage is done." I knew everything I said would get back to Janet. Wendy's reaction was predictable. Instead of showing concern, she smiled and placed her hand on my leg. I felt like this was a test, one I was determined to pass since I had no emotional attraction to Wendy. Physically, though, she was tempting, especially since another button on her blouse had somehow come undone. "You know, I've always admired you and Janet as a couple," Wendy continued, her tone probing. "You must be really secure in your love to let her date other guys. Or are you just pretending not to care?" My blood ran cold. We hadn't discussed dating during this separation, but my reminder, "Don't forget you're married," should have made my stance clear. Without a word, I abruptly left the house and headed to the backyard. Through the kitchen window, I saw Janet lounging on the deck in a bikini, sunbathing. With determination, I marched outside. "What's this about you dating, Janet?" I asked, trying to keep my tone calm. "I haven't been dating, Kurt," she answered nonchalantly. "We met a couple of guys last Tuesday at a club, danced with them, and mentioned we might be there again. We bumped into them last night, but it wasn't a date." "And what happened last night?" I pressed. "Nothing inappropriate, just dancing," she said. "They bought us drinks, but we didn't kiss or do anything like that. We just danced." "Since when is it appropriate for a married woman to dance with other men while her husband's not there?" I asked. She was silent. "If you see them again, it'll definitely be a date, and it's definitely inappropriate. Janet, all of this is hurting me. I still don't know what this separation is about. Can we skip the next 2 weeks and just have you come home? I really miss you." "No, Kurt, not yet," she replied firmly. "In fact, I think we'll go longer than a month. I haven't gotten my old feelings for you back yet." She seemed oddly uncomfortable, like she didn't truly want to say that. Of all her recent behavior, this was the most confusing. I stared at her for a moment before getting up to leave. "You could ask me on another date, you know," she remarked casually. "You might get lucky this time." Without pausing or turning back, I replied, "Or you could ask me out. You know where I live." Starting Monday, Janet called the home phone every night. Our conversations were brief and uncomfortable, and I had the feeling she was just checking to see if I was home. The implication didn't sit well with me. On Friday night, the call forwarding to my mobile worked perfectly. I answered, hearing music in the background. I was already on my way to Wendy's house and saw Janet's car was missing from the driveway. I drove by the nightclub strip nearby and eventually spotted her car parked outside one of the bars. I peered through the window and saw Janet and Wendy sitting alone in a booth. Shortly after, 2 more women joined them. One was Barbara, a friend of Janet's, and the other was unfamiliar. Seeing my chance, I slipped into the bar unnoticed and took a seat in the corner, far from their view. A few minutes later, luck was on my side as the booth next to theirs emptied. I quickly sat down, staying out of sight by keeping my back to them. With some effort, I managed to catch most of the conversation, with Barbara leading it. "Conversation? You're crazy, Janet," Barbara said incredulously. "From what you've said, your Kurt sounds way more romantic than my husband," said a voice I didn't recognize, likely belonging to the stranger. "Yeah, I agree," the stranger continued. "I would have been happy to get half of what you described from my ex." Wendy chimed in. "Don't you think Janet deserves better? Just look at her. She's gorgeous." Barbara added, "I don't know. This sounds like a dangerous game to me." "How do you treat him, Janet? Do you spoil him rotten? He must be exhausted from all that overtime. Do you keep him in bed all Sunday, giving him everything he wants?" "If you were mine, I would," Janet replied softly, but I couldn't make out her words. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, and the next thing I heard was Barbara's voice again. "Is that all? And you're still making this guy fight for you? At that moment, someone started the jukebox, giving me the perfect opportunity to slip away to the restroom. When I came back, my booth was taken, so I returned to my corner in the bar. As the crowd grew, I wondered how long it would be until the guys showed up. Over the next hour, I watched several men approach the girls, attempting to make conversation, but all of them left disappointed. Then I noticed the unfamiliar woman walking toward the bar. As she passed my corner, I made a show of moving aside for her. She smiled and ordered 4 drinks. While waiting, she turned to me and asked, "So, do you come here often?" with a playful grin. "Hey, that's my line," I joked. "Well, you were too slow," she shot back. We struck up a light conversation until her drinks were ready. I noticed her glancing at my wedding ring finger. "The conversation at my table is awful. Do you mind if I use you as an excuse to escape?" she asked, flashing a mischievous smile. "Do I mind if a beautiful woman talks to me? What do you think? But I should warn you, I'm married, though my marriage is in serious trouble," I admitted. "Wow, well, thanks for being honest. I'm just looking for some company, so if that's okay, I'd still like to chat," she responded, her smile softening. Alice returned a couple of minutes later, and we continued talking easily for the next hour and a half. I kept glancing over to ensure no one noticed us. I saw a man had taken the empty seat at the girls' table, buying all the drinks. Alice was great company, and we quickly felt comfortable with each other. Around 11:30, Barbara approached us. "You're right, he is cute," Barbara whispered to Alice with a smile. "Alice, do you want a ride? Janet's offered to drive us home," Barbara asked. "I've got to get going anyway. It was lovely talking to you, Alice," I said, kissing her on the cheek. She blushed as she handed me a business card with a smile before leaving. 2 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Janet calling through the forwarded home phone line. "Are you having a party at the house?" she asked suspiciously. "No, I'm at a bar. I've been chatting with a beautiful girl all evening," I replied, not backing down. "What the hell, Kurt? Who said you could do that?" she exclaimed. "Are you implying that you're the only one who can date? Or are you saying I can't?" I shot back. "You can't while you're married to me. I expect you to behave appropriately," she said sharply. "So, you're saying you didn't call me from a bar earlier?" I challenged. "Well, yes," she admitted reluctantly. "And I suppose those guys from last time didn't show up either, right?" I pressed. "No, yes, maybe," she stammered. "Look, Kurt, I told you I'm not dating," she replied, her tone uncertain. "Janet, can we just stop this nonsense and go back to how things were? Come home now. I'll meet you there," I pleaded, softening my voice. There was a pause before she replied. "No, Kurt, I'm just not ready." "Okay, then just come for the night," I tried again. "No, sorry, Kurt, I'll call you later," she said before hanging up. The hours dragged on, and just as I was falling asleep, I heard the garage door open. My heart raced, thinking Janet had come home. I looked out the window and saw her car parked across the street. As the garage door closed, I realized she had only come by to check if I was home before driving off again. Disheartened, I returned to bed, my mind swirling with confusion. The next Saturday afternoon, Wendy dropped by. I confronted her about Janet's behavior, but she denied knowing anything, though unconvincingly. "What are you doing, Wendy? I'm married to your best friend," I said, holding her at arm's length as she tried to get close to me. "For now, Kurt," Wendy replied with feigned innocence. "I just wanted to see if I'd have a chance with you after Janet leaves." Her words sounded ridiculous, but they confirmed my suspicions. "Don't you mean if Janet leaves me?" I corrected. "Of course, Kurt, I really hope things work out for you," she said vaguely, sensing my unease. I walked her to the door, though she seemed reluctant to leave, even offering to prepare a picnic for us. In the end, I had to firmly explain how inappropriate her behavior was before she finally got the hint. "Are you and Janet going out tonight?" she asked before leaving. "Yes, probably," I replied, feeling frustrated. Later, I decided to call Alice. She was happy to hear from me, but said she couldn't meet that night. "How about Tuesday instead?" she suggested. "Just as friends, Alice. I'm still going through a messy situation, but I really enjoyed your company the other night," I reminded her, not wanting to lead her on. "I understand, Kurt. I enjoyed our chat too. Let's meet Tuesday," she said warmly. Monday marked the beginning of a new routine with Janet. She started calling me at 6 a.m. every day, again at 6 p.m. when I got home from work, and once more before bed. Though she claimed it was because she missed me, she kept refusing to come home. It was becoming clear she was just checking up on me. On Wednesday, I noticed a message on the home phone answering machine. Though it was just from a marketing company, Its significance struck me. It hadn't been diverted to my mobile. When I checked the home phone, I discovered the call forwarding had been disabled. It seemed someone had been by the house. When Tuesday arrived, I met Alice at her apartment and we headed out to a restaurant. She looked stunning as usual. Once we were seated, I decided to ask her a more personal question. "So would you like to tell me why your personal life is a bit complicated?" I asked, curious. Alice smiled but hesitated before answering. "Sure, her name is Diana," she revealed. Diana turned out to be Alice's 3-year-old daughter. The father had left them after deciding that family life wasn't for him. Tonight, Alice's mother was watching Diana. To steer the conversation away from my own problems, I turned the focus back to her experience at the bar last week. "You mentioned the conversation at your table was pretty awful. What was that all about?" I asked. Alice sighed. "Oh, that. It was just terrible conversation and shallow people. There was this woman named Janet. She's currently separated from her husband, but she's hoping that the separation will make him fight for her, be more romantic and all that. The crazy thing is, from what she described, he already seems like a great guy," Alice explained. I frowned. "Great? How?" "He brings her flowers every week, takes her on date nights every month, spoils her. Even though he works late on Saturdays, he still gets up early on Sundays to make her breakfast. He even surprised her with a cruise last year. Honestly, I would have been thrilled with half of that for my ex," Alice said, shaking her head. "Some people just don't appreciate what they have. It gets even crazier," she continued. "Before they even separated, she was trying to make him jealous." "How?" I asked, intrigued. "She would come home later and later from girls' nights out wearing men's cologne on purpose. One time she even got a pair of underwear from her friend Wendy, used ones if you can believe it. She left them on the bedroom floor, hoping he'd notice, but he didn't say a word," Alice recounted, both amused and baffled. "Her husband sounds pretty clueless," I said, trying to keep the mood light. "Or maybe he loved her so much that he ignored those signs," Alice suggested. "But when all her tricks failed, she and her friend came up with this trial separation idea, hoping it would make him desperate. Instead, he's not reacting at all." "Good for him," I said. "Yeah, but when he didn't play along, they tried escalating. She stopped reaching out to him, and when he ignored her, her friend planted the idea that she was dating other guys. Still, he didn't bite. Honestly, I admire him. It's exactly what I'd do if someone treated me like that," Alice said sympathetically. "The heartbreaking part is when Barbara asked Janet how much effort she put into the marriage. That's when Janet seemed to realize how one-sided their relationship had been. You'd think that would be the wake-up call she needed to stop all this, but no. They've backed themselves into a corner because this proud guy refuses to follow their script," Alice added. "She could just go back to him, lay everything out, and try to fix it," I suggested. "Yeah, that's probably what she really wants. But I think her friend is the one keeping her on this path. Wendy gave her some strange, almost carnivory looks last Friday," Alice said, her tone thoughtful. "Do you think her friend is trying to drive a wedge between them to go after the husband herself?" I asked. "You might be onto something. It would fit with what I've seen, but if that's true, it makes her a cold, manipulative person," Alice said, narrowing her eyes. As our meals arrived, the conversation turned to lighter topics, but I couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at me. When the waitress cleared our plates, I felt I had to address it. "You know, Alice, everything you've said has convinced me that you're a genuinely good person with strong values," I began. "Thank you," she replied with a smile. "Do you think I'm a decent person?" I asked, bracing myself. "Yes, I do. I think I'm a good judge of character, and I have no doubt you're a kind person," Alice answered without hesitation. Taking a deep breath, I realized what I had to do. "I need to tell you something," I said, gently holding her hands. "Please forgive me, Alice, but I haven't been entirely truthful with you. I've been struggling with a lot of confusion lately, and I've done things I'm not proud of in an effort to sort it out. But I respect you, and that's why I need to be honest and tell you everything." Alice looked at me with concern, waiting for me to continue. "My name is Kurt, and I've been married to a woman named Janet for 6 years. About 4 weeks ago, she insisted on a trial separation despite my objections. Tonight, a new friend suggested I should move on from her given the disrespect and pain she's caused me. And I've been leaning that way myself. You were right. I did treat her like a queen. But looking back, I see how little she gave in return." Alice's expression shifted as a range of emotions flickered across her face before settling on horror. She covered her mouth with a clenched fist. "Oh my God, did I just call your wife a stupid witch?" she gasped. "Actually, I was quite offended that you spoke about my wife that way," I replied, trying to keep a straight face. Her expression softened a bit, though the conflict in her eyes lingered. "Do you realize your first concern was whether you offended me? That speaks volumes about your character." "Of course, I forgive you," I said, trying to lighten the mood. Alice looked relieved but still tense. "So is that why you approached me on Friday night? Were you trying to gather information?" I hesitated for a moment before nodding. "You're right. That question caught me off guard. But can I count on your friendship until this situation gets resolved one way or another?" "Absolutely, Kurt. But I want to be clear. I don't want to have any part in sabotaging your marriage," she said firmly. "Thank you. Your friendship is all I need right now. From my perspective, I thought our marriage was perfectly fine until one Thursday when Janet dropped the trial separation bombshell. She originally planned to leave without explaining anything, but I insisted on some clarity. Even with her explanation, I'm still confused. I didn't have many close friendships because I was so focused on either work or my relationship with Janet." Alice listened carefully before asking, "Do you think there's a chance for reconciliation?" "I'm not sure, Alice. Part of me feels like taking her back after the way she's treated me would be a letdown to myself. And after our conversation, I've realized just how one-sided our marriage has been, especially when it comes to romance. Honestly, it's a bit embarrassing to admit," I confessed. By mutual agreement, we shifted to lighter topics for the rest of the evening and ended up having a good time. Eventually, Alice needed to head home to relieve her mother, who was babysitting Diana. "I had a great time tonight," Alice said with a smile as we stood outside her apartment. "So did I replied, kissing her on the cheek before saying goodbye. The next day, as I walked toward the grocery store, I heard someone call out from a nearby coffee shop. I turned around to see Janet, Wendy, and another woman sitting at a table. My heart sank when I recognized Barbara. She couldn't hide her surprise upon seeing me. "You!" Barbara exclaimed, her eyes widening. The implications hit me quickly. Janet would soon realize I had been spying on her and that there were no men involved in her Friday night outings. Depending on what Barbara said, Janet might even figure out that Alice had shared details with me. Surprisingly, I wasn't as concerned as I expected to be. I made a polite excuse to leave, saying I needed to get home to cook. I watched Janet's face for any signs of guilt, but she didn't seem to notice anything. Later that night, around 9:30 p.m., the phone rang, just as I was about to fall asleep. Janet's voice came through sharply on the other end. "Kurt, didn't I tell you not to spy on me? This shows a lack of trust and respect," she scolded. "From my perspective, Janet, you started this separation without giving me a clear explanation. Wouldn't you try to understand the situation too?" I responded, frustration seeping into my tone. "It's still a violation of our agreement, Kurt." "Your agreement, Janet," I shot back, letting the silence hang in the air, hoping she'd understand the difference. But her response took an unexpected turn. "Kurt, I'm struggling to figure all of this out. This trial separation isn't playing out the way I thought it would. I'm not sure if my feelings for you are what they need to be. I think we should extend it by another month or two to see how things go." She paused, waiting for a reaction. I chose to stay silent. If she was hoping for an outburst, she wasn't going to get one. "Okay, Kurt. I didn't want to bring this up, but I think it's fair. I believe I should be allowed to date other men. Maybe it will help me appreciate you more and reignite my feelings for you," she continued, her voice soft but determined. This time, my silence wasn't deliberate. I was simply stunned. When I finally found my voice, I decided not to speak. Anything I said wouldn't resolve the situation. "Kurt, are you still there?" she pressed. "I think dating would be a serious mistake, Janet," I replied, my voice steady. "Let me be clear. If you date or engage in anything that crosses the boundaries of our marriage, meeting a man repeatedly, dancing, touching, or kissing another man, I will take it as your decision to leave our marriage. Am I clear?" There was silence on the other end before she responded, her voice sharp. "Well, Kurt, I don't think you're in a position to set terms. You don't own me. I think I'm entitled to the romance and companionship I've been missing over the past month." At that moment, I seriously questioned Janet's state of mind. Did she not realize the reason she was missing romance was because she had left the person who provided it? "So, Janet, you're still intent on opening up this marriage, are you?" I asked, struggling to comprehend her logic. "You've never given me a reason for this separation that made any sense. I thought you might be testing me to make me put more effort into our marriage, but I dismissed that idea as too disrespectful. The silence hung between us, and when she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "I'm sorry, Kurt. My mind is made up." Her words were full of resignation. The dial tone ended the conversation, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it also marked the end of our marriage. Strangely, when I got home on Thursday and Friday nights, I noticed Janet's car parked 100 meters down the street, facing away from my approach. 5 minutes later, I saw her drive off, adding yet another layer of confusion to an already bewildering situation. On Thursday night, Alice called. She graciously forgave me, lifting a weight off my shoulders. She then asked for an update, assuring me her inquiry was purely out of friendship. I recounted my recent conversations with Janet and my analysis of her likely motives. "So, what's your plan now, Kurt? Just going to sit back and wait for her to deal the final blow to your marriage? I guess. Do you want me to keep an eye on her this weekend, Kurt?" "No, don't get involved, Alice. How about we figure out where they are and you take me to the same place?" "No, I won't stoop to her level, but I would like to see you this weekend." We quickly arranged a picnic for Sunday afternoon. After a little back and forth, Alice didn't press me on why I wasn't free on Friday or Saturday. She understood. We must have talked for 2 hours that Friday, and it didn't take long to figure out where Janet and Wendy were. The fact that they were at the same bar made me think of two possibilities. Either Janet was confident I wouldn't dare spy on her again, or more likely, she expected me to do just that. This time, I watched everything unfold from the windows, feeling a bit ashamed of myself. Surprisingly, Janet behaved well that night. It was just her, Wendy, and Barbara chatting. Until around 10 p.m., Wendy accepted a few dance offers, but Janet and Barbara turned them down. Eventually, two persistent guys approached Janet and Wendy. Barbara left shortly after, leaving the trio at the table. Throughout the evening, Janet and Wendy frequently scanned the darker corners of the bar. I was pleasantly surprised when they both left together at 11:30. I followed their taxi home and stayed until the lights went out. Saturday was different. Again, they were at the same bar, and the same two guys were waiting. This time, they didn't waste time making a move. My marriage ended when Wendy went off to dance with one of them, leaving the other guy to pursue Janet. From my vantage point, I saw his hand on her leg. I gave her 5 minutes to handle the situation, during which she scanned the bar at least 6 times. I walked into the bar. When Janet saw me approaching, she at least had the decency to push the guy's hand away. Her expression, however, was smug as she opened with, "Kurt, I warned you not to spy on me again." Her unfortunate companion, sensing the tension, stood up, unsure whether to confront me or flee. Ignoring social norms, I stepped in close, towering over him with my 6-foot frame. In a low growl, I uttered the shortest sentence possible. "Go!" He bolted. Keeping my eyes on Janet's face, I sat in his vacated seat and pulled a roll of papers from my bosom pocket. "These are divorce papers, mutually agreed upon. I've already filled them out. All you need to do is sign. I've also included an agreement to split everything 50-50. I'll keep the house since you've already moved out." As I spoke, I watched her smug expression turn to one of horror. I didn't stay to see the rest of her reaction. Avoiding eye contact, I left quickly, hoping to hide the emotions building inside me. Curiosity got the better of me, and I returned to watch through the window. Janet was crying openly. Wendy returned shortly after, looking puzzled. As soon as she saw the papers on the table, a grin spread across her face. Wendy did most of the talking over the next hour. 15 minutes in, Janet's tears had stopped, and by the end of their conversation, she looked remarkably at ease. Wendy's influence was clear. She had somehow convinced Janet that their plan was still on track. That night, sleep eluded me once again as I prepared for the inevitable final confrontation. More heartache was on the horizon, and despite everything, I couldn't shake my feelings for Janet. Expecting Wendy to show up the next day, I pretended not to be home when she arrived. Ignoring her calls, I waited in silence. Strangely, Janet didn't call. By 1:30 p.m., I found myself at Alice's door with a bunch of red roses. As soon as she saw the flowers, Alice wrapped me in a warm hug, offering comfort amidst the chaos. "I was going to ask how the past few days went, but I think I can tell," Alice remarked perceptively, glancing at the roses in my hand. She understood the gesture. It was clear that roses weren't something friends exchanged in the midst of unresolved issues. She led me inside, where I met her mother. "Kurt, this is my mom, Batty. Mom, meet my boyfriend, Kurt." Alice introduced us, her words catching me by surprise in the best way. I was momentarily speechless, wondering how much Alice had shared with her mom about us. Thankfully, Batty addressed the question hanging in the air. "So, is it over?" she asked. All but the shouting, as my dad used to say, I replied, updating them on the latest development. I explained that Janet hadn't fully grasped the seriousness of the situation yet, and that I still had to prove my resolve. Through my words, they could sense the pain I was in, and Batty offered a comforting hug. Just then, a little angel entered the room. Diana had woken from her nap. I was introduced to her as well. Diana seemed disappointed when Alice mentioned we were going out, despite Batty's efforts to cheer her up. Noticing Diana's reaction, I leaned toward Alice. "Can she come with us?" I whispered. "Are you sure?" she asked, surprised by my offer. "You're a package deal, and I accept that," I assured her. "That would be wonderful. It's hard to be away from her all week while I'm at work, so I try to spend my weekends with her," Alice explained, her eyes filled with gratitude. Diana's face lit up with joy when she heard she could join us for the afternoon. We had a wonderful time by the river, soaking in the sunshine and enjoying each other's company. Alice joked about feeling a bit left out, but the grin on her face made it clear she was only teasing. After dropping both of them home, I was greeted by Batty, who had prepared dinner. I said goodbye to Alice with a gentle kiss on the cheek before heading home. As I arrived home, I sensed Janet nearby, lurking in her usual spot. Before I could open the front door, she pulled into the driveway. Stepping out of her car, she handed me the divorce papers I had given her on Saturday. "Signed and witnessed." "Here you go, Kurt. Signed and witnessed." "Good night," she said, catching me off guard. Without another word, she walked back to her car. But as she was leaving, she called out boldly, "Now that I've called your bluff, maybe you can ask me out on a date this week. I'm free on Wednesday," before driving off. In that moment, I realized Janet was operating on a completely different wavelength. If the end was near, it seemed like it was going to be a chaotic one. And the chaos began on Monday evening. Wendy was waiting for me in the driveway when I got home from work. Before I could react, she kissed me. I pushed her away firmly and exclaimed, "Wendy, let me make this clear once and for all. I'm not the least bit interested in you." Before she could respond, Janet's car roared into the driveway, tires screeching. Wendy tried to run, but Janet blocked her escape. As soon as Janet stopped the car, she jumped out, flinging the door open and knocking Wendy to the ground. When Wendy tried to get up, Janet slapped her hard across the head, sending her back down. Wendy stayed down this time, knowing better than to challenge Janet's fury. But Janet, having realized she'd been deceived, unleashed her full rage, kicking Wendy repeatedly. I knew better than to interfere. Janet's anger was wild, like a cornered animal. When Janet showed signs of exhaustion but still seethed with anger, I risked stepping in to restrain her. At that moment, a police car happened to drive by. Both Janet and I were cuffed, and an ambulance was called for Wendy's injuries. Janet was interviewed first, and I could hear her shouts echoing from the holding cells. Eventually, they moved her to a cell across from mine. When it was my turn to speak, I told the police the full story, trying to explain that Janet's actions had been provoked. It felt like the least I could do. They released me with an apology at 11 p.m. On Monday, I went to work as usual, grateful for the peace that being underground provided, where cell signals couldn't reach me. On the way home, I updated Alice over the phone. She invited me over for dinner and relayed a sweet request from Diana. "Can that nice Kurt read me a bedtime story tonight?" Running later than usual, I stopped by Wendy's parents' house. I explained what I knew about Wendy's manipulation of Janet. Surprisingly, her parents weren't shocked. I urged them to persuade Wendy not to press charges against Janet, and they promised to help. When I arrived home, I saw Janet's car in the garage. Upstairs, her suitcases were unpacked, and I could hear the shower running. Anticipating what was coming, I waited downstairs and called Alice to cancel our dinner plans. We speculated about Janet's intentions, but neither of us saw what was coming next. Janet strode down the stairs confidently, a wave of unease hitting me. "What's for dinner, Kurt?" I hesitated before answering, and she stepped directly in front of me. "I've decided to forgive you, Kurt," she announced. "We've both been foolish, but let's move on. I'm back. If you haven't made dinner plans, let's go out." I struggled to find words, my disbelief evident. "Forgive me. Janet, what exactly have I done that I need forgiving for?" For the first time, Janet's confidence wavered. "For the pain you caused with that ridiculous divorce stunt, Kurt. It was a low blow, but I knew you were bluffing." "What makes you so sure I was bluffing, Janet?" "Because Wendy said—" Her voice trailed off as realization dawned. She sank onto the coffee table, the color draining from her face. For several long minutes, I watched as a new understanding took hold. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I gave you up, didn't I? You weren't bluffing about the divorce. I thought you were, so I signed it. I shook my head sadly. For the record, Janet, you didn't give me up, you threw me away. I've always done everything I could for you. And what did I get in return? You left me alone, lost and confused. I warned you it was a gamble. After all the love and effort I put in, I expected at least respect and loyalty. But did I get that? No, I got disrespected and abandoned. Did you ever think about the imbalance in our marriage? The one-sided effort I've seen over the last 5 weeks? No, Janet whispered. You let someone manipulate you into thinking you could get more. Well, Wendy's out of the picture now, she added. This isn't about Wendy. I know she tried to drive us apart, but I never considered her more than a manipulator, I replied. So we're okay now, right, Kurt? Janet asked, hope in her voice. This was the moment of truth. No, Janet, we're not okay. The divorce papers prove it. I can't forget the disrespect, the threats. And when you threw me away, someone else picked me up. Janet stared at me, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. For the first time in all these weeks, the realization seemed to sink in. Her gamble had cost her everything. You can't mean that, Kurt, she whispered, shaking her head slowly. You're just saying this to hurt me. You wouldn't. I don't want to hurt you, Janet, I interrupted softly. I never wanted any of this. But I've come to understand that you and we've been living in 2 different worlds. I stayed, waiting, hoping things would go back to the way they were. But you pushed me away time and time again. She sat down, her hands trembling as she placed them in her lap. But I signed those papers because I thought you were bluffing. I thought you were testing me, just like I was testing you. I sighed, the weight of all the emotions I had been carrying finally feeling lighter. This was never a test, Janet. Not for me. I wanted to fix things, to understand why you felt the way you did. But instead, you gave up on us, on everything we built. She lowered her head, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the woman I had fallen in love with years ago, the woman who had once been my partner, my friend, my confidant. But that person was buried now, hidden beneath layers of pride, manipulation, and regret. I never stopped loving you, Kurt, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Even now, I still love you. I closed my eyes briefly, struggling to keep my composure. Love isn't enough, Janet. Not anymore. Love without respect, without trust. It's hollow. You've made me feel like I was the only one fighting for this marriage, and I've come to realize that's not the kind of relationship I want. Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, I saw true vulnerability in her. I didn't think it would end like this, she whispered. I thought I could push you, that you would fight harder for me, for us. I never expected you to let go. I knelt down in front of her, my heart heavy but resolute. I didn't let go, Janet. You pushed me away. I stayed as long as I could, but eventually, I had to start thinking about myself, about what I need and deserve in a relationship. And I deserve more than what you've given me these past few months. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her breath shaky. Is she the reason? The woman you met? I hesitated, then nodded. She's not the reason our marriage ended, Janet. That was between you and me. But she helped me see that I was worth more than being someone's second choice. She helped me realize that I deserve someone who respects me, who doesn't treat love like a game. Janet stood abruptly, her face hardening as she tried to suppress her emotions. So that's it then? You're just going to walk away? After everything we've been through, all the plans we made, you'll just throw it all away for some woman you barely know? I shook my head, feeling a pang of sorrow for how far we had drifted from each other. I'm not throwing anything away, Janet. I'm moving forward. And honestly, I think you need to do the same. This version of us, it isn't healthy. It's been toxic for both of us. She paced around the room, running her hands through her hair in frustration. I thought we had more time, she muttered. I thought we could figure it out. We had plenty of time, Janet, but you chose to test me instead of talking to me. You chose to push me away instead of pulling me closer. And now it's too late. The words seemed to hang in the air, final and irreversible. Janet stopped pacing, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I didn't mean for it to end like this, she said, her voice small. I never wanted to lose you. I stood, feeling the need to bring this conversation to a close. Maybe one day you'll understand why it ended this way. But for now, we need to accept that it's over. We've hurt each other too much to go back. She looked at me one last time, her eyes searching mine for something, perhaps a sign that there was still hope. But there was none. Not anymore. As I turned to leave, Janet called out to me, her voice trembling. "What happens now, Kurt? What do I do?" I paused at the door, my hand resting on the knob. "You figure out who you are without me," I said quietly, "and I'll do the same." With that, I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. Outside, the evening air was cool against my skin, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of calm. The chaos that had consumed my life for so long was finally over, and while the future was uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. I was free. As I got into my car, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Alice. "Looking forward to seeing you tonight. Diana can't wait to hear her bedtime story." A small smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. I texted back a quick reply and started the engine, heading towards something new, something real, something built on mutual respect and understanding. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Whatever the future held, I was ready for it. Last year on Father's Day began like any other. I'd be up early, waiting for my wife and teenage daughters to join me. On Mother's Day, I'd treat my wife to mimosas for breakfast, a fancy cheese plate for lunch, and her favorite steak dinner. As the girls grew older, I handled the pampering solo. On Father's Day, my wife usually cooked me a special breakfast, though last year was different. I waited until she woke to eat, starving by then. When she finally did, she greeted me with a kiss and got to work on a family breakfast. We later enjoyed lunch at a quirky cafe with Doctor Who-themed sandwiches. My wife, a calendar devotee, orchestrates our life with precision, managing holidays and kids' activities with ease. All events, from holidays to birthdays, are marked on our calendar, rarely overlooked except by me. When my wife noticed my birthday coincided with Father's Day, I wasn't surprised. She joked about double gifts, promising something special. I kissed her cheek, hoping for more than the usual. She usually teased with head employments during foreplay, but on my birthday and Father's Day, they were special treats, given without expectation of return. I wasn't clueless. I was excited, thinking I might get a rare treat on my upcoming birthday. But as the weeks passed, things felt off. My wife, usually steady, started acting strange, working late, dressing up more for her job at the bakery, even wearing makeup. Doubts crept in when she went out alone on a Friday, which was unusual for us. We were a tight-knit couple, preferring each other's company. Our marriage felt solid. We weren't big on going out. Our ideal night was lounging at home, so seeing her dolled up that Friday was unexpected. She wore a new skirt, tan stockings, and heels, looking like she'd been to the salon. I whistled, thinking we had plans, but she explained she was going out with coworkers. Shocked, I asked why she hadn't mentioned it earlier. She seemed uneasy, but apologized, claiming she'd just been asked. I eyed her outfit, questioning how she managed all that in an hour at work. I grew increasingly frustrated, sensing her dishonesty, yet unable to confront her. Her infidelity seemed unfathomable. She embodied the typical suburban wife and mother. Our bed life remained vibrant, adding to my confusion. When she brushed off my suspicions, claiming she worked half a day and wanted to look nice, I was left speechless as she hurried out the door. She returned near midnight, her hair hastily tied up, dispelling any notion of a salon visit. Ignoring me, she headed straight for the shower, leaving me bewildered. Something was amiss in our seemingly perfect life, and I couldn't shake the feeling of impending trouble, especially considering my line of work in retail. On Saturday morning, as I prepared for work, my wife didn't wake to bid me farewell as she usually did. I found it surprising. At the store, I encountered Missy, the morning barista, waiting at the entrance. With her striking blue eyes and red hair, she caught my attention, despite my contented marriage. Redheads had always intrigued me. "Hey, Bill," she called out as I approached the entrance, still locked, as it was half an hour before opening. Missy had mentioned feeling uncomfortable with the night crew. "Good morning, Missy," I greeted, unlocking the doors. "What's up, Bill? You look down," she observed. "Just a lot on my mind today," I admitted. She gave me a curious look, but didn't pry. "Give me a sec. I'll get you some of our best coffee," she offered. Forced to smile, I replied, "Sounds good. I'll join you soon." I secured the doors while she hastened to ready the cafe for the busy morning ahead. Knowing how bustling our little cafe became once the store opened, I made my rounds on the floor, checking in on the department crews. While my competent department managers made these checks unnecessary, I valued the chance to greet and chat with my team. Maintaining positive relationships with them mattered to me, and I believe they appreciated the effort. My final stop was at the coffee shop, where Missy had my usual large black coffee ready and waiting. "Here's your cup of Megamart's finest brew," Missy said, handing it over. "Thanks, Missy," I replied, pushing $2 across the counter. "No need for payment today, boss," she insisted. "Can't take any chances, Missy. I cover all my expenses here. Last thing I need is someone causing trouble with corporate," I explained. She gasped. "Bill, I'd never do that." "Not saying you would, Missy, but I can't risk it, even for a $2 coffee. You'd be surprised what I have to deal with. Denying someone a day off or cutting overtime, it's just not worth it," I explained. "All right, boss, understood." She nodded. I waved farewell and took a sip from my mug, aware that some employees likely received free coffee occasionally, though it was impossible to track. And it wasn't worth the hassle of monitoring video footage just to ensure everyone paid. As the company's leader, I faced risks, dealing with employee frustrations over trivial matters like parking regulations, prompting unnecessary HR calls. The day passed quietly, with the highlight being an old lady stealing cat and bird food. It provided the distraction I needed, keeping me occupied without dwelling on my marital issues. Upon returning home, I found my wife and daughters heading out to a concert with other families. While it had been planned and noted on the calendar, I had forgotten. I hoped to speak with Katie later, eager to resolve our recent tensions. Not knowing what had transpired the previous night nagged at me, leaving me with little else to dwell on. Tonight, I seized the chance to snoop around. I checked her email, expecting it to be fruitless, but surprisingly, no one else had sent messages. Since she had a cell phone, I couldn't check her texts or call log. Checking her clothes for clues was also futile, as she'd already done her Saturday laundry. Frustrated, I achieved nothing and went to bed after the movie feeling just as unsettled. On my birthday and Father's Day, I began my day as usual, toast, coffee, and enjoying the morning on the terrace. It was beautiful, with birds chirping, and I pondered what the day held in store. Around 9, I returned inside to refill my coffee and found my wife and daughters up and packing lunch. Surprised by their early activity, I questioned their plans. Jill announced a beach trip, catching me off guard. As they departed, I realized they remembered my birthday, unlike how I often had to remind them of important dates. Perplexed by Katie's oversight, I received a call from my mom, hoping it was them coming back, but it wasn't. "Hey, Billy, happy birthday and Father's Day," Mom greeted. "Thanks, Mom. Kathy's got some big plans for you guys today," I replied. "Nope, she took the girls to the beach just a bit ago," she informed me. "Really? That's not like her. I'd have thought she'd whip up a tasty breakfast and make today special for you," I commented. "Yeah. Honestly, I'm not sure what's up lately. She's been acting strange for weeks now," Mom shared. "Well, don't sweat it. She probably has something special lined up for later. I've got to head to church." "Love you, Billy," Mom assured me. "Love you, Mom." Mom's eternal optimism and her close relationship with Kathy always warmed my heart, especially since Dad passed away a few years ago. I stood there, pondering the state of my marriage, when the phone rang once more. It was my assistant, Anne. "Bill, there was an incident at the coffee shop this morning." "What happened? Was Missy involved?" "Unfortunately, yes. She was on the stairs when a customer shoved her. She lost her balance and took a fall." "Oh my goodness. Is she all right?" "They've taken her to St. Alex's Hospital for x-rays. It looks like she might have a broken arm or something." "Poor girl. Do you need me to cover her shift?" "No, everything's sorted. I just wanted to give you a heads up for tomorrow. I apologize for reaching out on Father's Day." "Don't worry about it, Anne. Thanks for letting me know." I hoped Missy was all right, but assuming they wouldn't return, I went to IHOP for breakfast. The bustling atmosphere, filled with happy families celebrating fathers, overwhelmed me, and I left to avoid breaking down. Opting for McDonald's, I enjoyed a satisfying breakfast with coffee and orange juice. Sitting in the park, I reminisced about boating trips with my daughters when they were young, realizing they had grown distant as they neared college. Their outings with their mother became more frequent, perhaps for the best. I acknowledged there would likely be no dinner together as the day wore on, so I grabbed a Reuben at the doctor-themed cafe. A Facebook post garnered the usual Father's Day wishes, But my mother-in-law's comment about the beach trip surprised me, as my wife had been posting beach photos. Feeling down, I sought solace in a sports bar, but soon retreated to a cigar lounge, indulging in a pricey Opus X. Settling in to watch the game, I was invited to join a group playing cards. "I'm Bill," I introduced myself to the older gentleman. "I'm Lance, and this is my brother Jerry. Pleasure to meet you both." They finished their handshake and included me in their little 5-card game. "Grab yourself a drink, Bill," Lance offered, placing the cooler on the floor. I expressed gratitude and opted for a Miller Lite. "No kids, or did the ex take them with a new guy?" Jerry quipped with a smirk. I frowned and replied, "My wife and the girls are at the beach. Seems like they've lost track of the day." "Tough break," Lance chimed in. "I hardly see my boys. They're both in the service." Jerry nodded, adding, "My daughter's out in California. My grandson Charlie just turned 2. I'm heading there next week." "That sounds wonderful," I said. As my daughters hit 17 and 18, I began longing for the days of them being little. They nodded in agreement. Eventually, the conversation circled back to my wife. "Do you think she genuinely forgot, or is she avoiding you?" Jerry asked, echoing my own thoughts. Recounting the recent weeks and Friday's issues, they shook their heads in disbelief. "She's cheating on you," Lance asserted, with Jerry nodding in agreement. "I can't believe it," I muttered, grappling with the revelation, though deep down I knew it made sense. "Listen, Bill," Lance began, recounting his own experience. "I've been down this road. The sudden changes in behavior. The late nights out, dressed provocatively. The lack of respect. Been there, buddy." Lance shared how he regretted his initial reaction of divorcing his unfaithful wife, highlighting the financial and emotional toll it took. "Bill, trust me," he continued, urging me to consider forgiveness if I truly loved her. "It'll be better for you in the long run. Guys in their 40s don't often get second chances at love. Thank you, Lance. You've given me a lot to think about." I might have said it aloud, but deep down, I thought he was crazy. Forgiving her for cheating and staying married seemed impossible. I shook both men's hands, bid them farewell, and left. As I scrolled through Facebook on the couch, dinner time approached. Seeing my daughters and wife's posts filled with pictures of their joyful day saddened me further. Enough of this, I thought. It was time to face reality. My wife had forgotten my birthday and Father's Day. What did it matter? What counted was my certainty that she had cheated, especially after Friday night's strange behavior. Her goal seemed to be rubbing it in my face, and now she had succeeded. Determined to move forward, I prepared for the evening. I decided to treat myself to dinner at my favorite restaurant, even if it meant a long wait. After a shower and donning my sport coat and slacks, I headed out for steak. Sitting at the bar, awaiting a table, an older man took the seat beside me. Observing my solitary champagne bottle, he frowned but refrained from comment, opting for a martini. As the bartender filled my glass, he couldn't resist asking if I was celebrating alone or taking someone else's place. I assured him it was just me. He nodded and took a sip, revealing he was awaiting his family, 3 generations strong despite his daughter breaking her arm earlier. He chuckled, noting the unexpected nature of grown children breaking bones. I nodded in agreement. "Looks like I'll be cooking solo for a while. My wife needs to focus on taking care of Missy and Mia and leave me be." Suddenly, a little girl called out, "Grandpa!" and dashed across the crowded bar, showering the man with affectionate hugs and kisses. Then I heard my name. Missy and her mother approached me. The resemblance between them was striking. "Hey, Missy, how's your arm?" I inquired. "Not bad. The painkillers are doing their job. But it was rough when they said it," she replied. Missy introduced me to her parents, Jack and Mary, and their adorable daughter, Mia. "Where's your wife, Bill?" Mary asked. "I'm not sure. She took the girls to the beach this morning, and I haven't heard from them all day." "On Father's Day? And it's your birthday too?" Mary exclaimed. "That's terrible. What's going on with her?" Not wanting to delve into it, I shrugged. "Forget about her, you're joining us," Mary insisted. I grasped Jack's reference to his red rage. "You don't want them to gang up on you, Bill," he chuckled, a testament to his experience dealing with familial conflicts. "But it's your day, Jack. I don't want to intrude," I replied. "Nonsense," he retorted. "This is our day, Bill. Grandpa, remember?" As their table's buzzer sounded, he tossed a $20 bill and left, insisting I meet him at our table. "Sorry about that, Bill. My parents can be stubborn," Missy apologized. "Don't worry, Missy. Eating alone would be worse, I assured her. Dinner conversation remained light, filled with anecdotes about our daughters. Mia giggled at stories of her mom's childhood antics. Later, my phone rang, but I ignored it, placing it on the table. "Your wife?" Mary inquired. "Yes, it's complicated," I admitted. "Maybe you can find a way to forgive her," Mary suggested, glancing at Jack. I signaled for the check, expressing gratitude for the meal and treating them. As I signed the check, I pondered the advice I'd received, despite lacking solid evidence of her infidelity. Ignoring the persistent ringing of my phone, I couldn't help but wonder what was wrong with people. As I pulled into the garage, my daughters greeted me with kisses and hugs, apologizing for forgetting Father's Day. "Girls, it's okay. I don't expect you to remember my birthday," I reassured them. Suddenly, Jill exclaimed, "Wait, it's your birthday today." She rushed inside, yelling at my wife. "Daddy, we didn't know. We're so sorry. You must hate us," Jill lamented. "No, sweetheart, I love you more than anything. We decided last night to go to the beach today, and we didn't realize it was your birthday." "It's okay. Don't worry. I'm not upset with you," I comforted her. Though I didn't express my anger toward her mother, it was my issue, not my daughter's. Ignoring the chaos in the kitchen, I changed upstairs and returned to find my wife sobbing alone. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I shook my head and retreated to the deck with a beer and cigar. Enjoying the serene evening, my wife interrupted me. "Bill, What's his name?" I interjected, my anger rising. She didn't respond, and I realized I was headed for divorce. What a mistake marrying her had been after nearly 20 years. At this point, I began fearing the worst. How long had she been unfaithful? Was he her first? Did I even know him? Were these girls truly mine? It's astonishing the negative thoughts that invade your mind when you're mistreated. I decided to request a paternity test for the girls as part of the divorce, not only for my peace of mind, but also to embarrass Katie. I spent the night researching divorce laws online before falling asleep on the couch. How I spent my birthday. Waking at 5 in the morning, I found Katie peacefully asleep in my bedroom, her undressed body curled around her pillow. Despite my restless night, she looked serene. Sadly, she was no longer mine, but I couldn't help admiring her beauty. After a quick shower, I left without waking her, only to be met by Jill in the hallway. "How bad is it, Dad?" she asked. "As bad as it can get," I sighed. "Can you forgive her? It's just one day's mistake," she pleaded. "Honey, it's more than forgetting my birthday or Father's Day. She cheated on me," I explained. "No, Dad, she wouldn't do that. Something must have pushed her, but I won't accept it. Think about it. She's been acting strange for weeks. Friday night, after getting all done up, she went out dressed provocatively." "That wasn't for you," Jill reasoned. "She avoided me all weekend. Clearly, she felt guilty or resentful toward me and didn't want to be around me at all." "When has she ever taken you to the beach without me? It's always a family outing. What if it's not an affair? What if it was just a one-time thing? Can't you forgive her for once?" Jill pleaded. "I doubt that's the case, honey. But look at her actions this weekend. Has she shown love toward me?" I questioned. "Daddy, you didn't see her face when Grandma called to ask why she didn't wish Grandpa a happy Father's Day. She dropped the phone and yelled no so loudly we thought Grandpa was having a heart attack," Jill recounted. "He's fine, Dad. Mom sobbed on her knees until we helped her up and sat her on the couch. She kept repeating that she loves you. Honestly, Jenny wanted to call an ambulance for her. We calmed her down and convinced her to call you," Jill continued. "I don't know what to say, Jill. She doesn't love me. You can't cheat on your spouse and claim to love them. That's not love, it's selfishness. Love should be selfless. When she was with another man, she abandoned me," I concluded. She hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't imagine it was just some random guy she met at a bar. There must have been flirting, or her accepting his advances. Pleasure touches, maybe even kissing and caressing, all leading up to her being with him. It's a betrayal to your spouse. To show carnal affection to someone else when you're in love, please don't divorce her. I have to head to work now. We'll talk more later," she said, walking into Jenny's room. I promised to discuss our conversation with Jenny. No more secrets in our family. I wondered how long we'd remain a family. Despite Kathy's likely busy schedule, I felt calm throughout the day. The only unusual thing was dealing with the paperwork related to Missy's accident. I ensured she'd be compensated for her vacation and helped her fill out the accident report, knowing she wasn't good with her left hand. She signed it, and I felt a pang of concern for her well-being. "How's home?" she asked. "Not good," I replied. She didn't deny the affair when I confronted her. "Damn, Bill," she said sympathetically. "I'm sorry," I murmured. "You probably don't want to hear my story, but I get it. My ex cheated on me when I was pregnant. I kicked him out before our daughter was born. My mom wasn't pleased. She basically called me disposable. Wow. I found it strange when your mom mentioned forgiving my wife last night. She was looking right at your dad, she revealed. Yeah, I noticed. I'm not sure who, but it makes me think one of them was cheating. I'm sorry, she offered. No need. If they're happy deceiving each other, let them. I'd rather not trust a liar, I stated firmly. Kathy wasn't home when I returned from work. She was probably with her lover, and I was furious. I drove to her grocery store, spotted her car, and was surprised to find her with a young man. She noticed me and seemed to yell no as I approached, but I left before she could say anything. If she was cheating, he could have her. I drove home, packed my bags, and decided to stay in a hotel until I found an apartment. Jenny and Jill begged me to stay, but I explained that I caught their mom almost cheating with a man in her car after work. Dad, there must be a mistake, Jenny pleaded. I saw what I saw. There's no innocent explanation for her being in the back parking lot with a man in her car, I insisted. Please don't break up our family, Jenny sobbed. Your mom did that, not me. I love you girls. I'll keep in touch every day, I reassured them before leaving them in tears and heading to the garage. As I drove out of the garage, Katie nearly hit me as she sped away. The following week was utter torment. I ignored all of my wife's calls, and she bombarded me with messages every hour, likely taking a week off work to do so. Despite pleas from my family and Kathy's sister, none would confirm her infidelity when I asked. Frustrated, I stopped taking their calls, insisting that my daughters avoid mentioning their mother. Eventually, I met with a lawyer and proposed splitting the house equally, even though I could have claimed a larger share due to my larger contributions. Surprisingly, I learned I didn't have to pay alimony since Kathy could support herself. The downside was lacking concrete proof of her affair, which could weaken my case in court. Nonetheless, I was willing to take my chances. My lawyer geared up for divorce proceedings, and life carried on. There'd be no forced mediation or lengthy legal battles. The split was fair, obvious to any judge, but nothing was smooth sailing. When served the papers, she rallied her family against me again. Supposedly, she only cheated once on that Friday before my birthday. Yet her relatives made me out to be the villain for not hearing her out. It was surreal. Even my daughters resisted until I fibbed about a court order for a DNA test. Kathy's letter arrived, admitting to a fling with a 21-year-old, which spared me the need to prove infidelity for the divorce. Finally, karma favored me. She resisted the divorce at first, but the judge approved it when he saw the terms I proposed and her admission of infidelity in the letter. I was to be divorced in 60 days, finding myself isolated for refusing to talk to her. I was labeled immature and a prick. Even my mother and daughters stopped talking to me. It hurt, but I stood by my principles. I called my daughters every day, leaving messages despite their silence. I refused to let them blame me for the lack of communication, making every effort to stay in touch. One change was having coffee with Missy on Sundays. We met at a local coffee shop, where she and Mia lived nearby. I confided in her about my struggles while Mia watched cartoons. Your daughters will come around, Bill, she reassured. Living with your wife. Who knows what she's put in their heads? I hope so. I just missed them terribly. The following week, I returned to the same store at the usual time and was engrossed in reading when I heard a familiar voice say, "Hey, stranger." I smiled and welcomed them to join me again. "Are you stalking me, or is this your usual routine?" she joked. "No, I live nearby and I enjoy having coffee and reading on Sunday mornings. It gets a bit lonely at home," I explained. We chatted about the neighborhood until we parted ways. Meeting every Sunday wasn't planned, but it became a habit. I found her company enjoyable, and little Mia was a delight. On the day the divorce was finalized, I knocked on the front door of my former house. My wife answered, tears evident. Without a word, she invited me in. "Are the girls home?" I inquired. "They're at a school musical. I knew you'd come tonight," she admitted. "So you waited until it was too late to stop it, didn't you?" I smirked. "Yes," she admitted. "I knew you'd try to beg and plead, but I couldn't let that happen. You broke my heart, and there's no forgiveness for that." "It was one mistake, Bill. Why couldn't you forgive me?" she pleaded. "Did you love me when you were with that guy? Did you love me when you ignored me on my birthday?" I countered. "If that's your version of love, then it's beyond repair." "I never wanted this to happen," she sobbed. "And I never wanted a cheating wife," I retorted. "But here we are." She tried to speak, but I interrupted. "Katie, you not only broke my heart, but you turned my own mother and daughters against me. I'll never forgive you for that." "You acted irrationally," she countered. If you don't make things right with my family, I'll expose your infidelity to every man you date. I don't need anyone else. Wrong answer. Then I'll find other ways to hurt and embarrass you, she threatened. As I stood to leave, she grabbed my arm. It's not my fault, she pleaded. Oh, really? Did I cheat on you? I shot back. You've normalized cheating to our daughters. They'll think it's okay because you've convinced them it was a one-time mistake. Well, I won't go down because of some idiot who made you feel hot. I freed my hand from hers. Rot in hell for ending our marriage over a fling, I spat, leaving her in tears, unaffected by her distress. A few weeks later, Missy knocked on my office door. Got a second, Bill? Sure, come on in, I replied, though I frowned, anticipating bad news. Bill, does the company have rules about dating coworkers? I disliked this question, hoping to ask her out myself, but it seemed I was too late. No, we have strict intimidation policies. It protects against potential issues arising from workplace relationships, I explained. Good, that's what I hope for, she said, leaving her contact details on my desk. My address and phone number. Let's have dinner tomorrow night. Mia will join us. I smiled and agreed, feeling grateful for the chance at happiness. Hey, it's Dad. Hope you and your sister are doing well. Nothing new here except a coworker asked me out. Anyway, love you and miss you. Call soon. Bye. I knew this message might stir up trouble, but I didn't mind. I needed to move forward, and I was glad Missy had taken the lead. She was not only beautiful, but also had a wonderful character. Her daughter was delightful, and I had already met her parents. I felt like things were finally looking up. Just 15 minutes later, Katie texted me, calling me a fool for already dating. I chuckled at her delusion. I had no intention of mourning the end of my marriage to a cheating wife. At 41, I felt young enough to find love again, even consider having more kids. Missy, in her 30s, might share that desire. It was early to think about such things, but as a single mom, it might be a priority for her. As for me, I hadn't been carnal in months. The next evening after work, I showered, shaved, and dressed casually. Glancing in the mirror, I was satisfied with what I saw. I was in good shape, no extra weight, and my brown hair showed no signs of gray. With a well-paying job and savings, I considered myself a catch, especially for someone like Missy. Yet I realized I had no clue how to navigate the dating scene. Marriage provided comfort and familiarity, from holding hands to intimacy. Dating was uncharted territory. Oh my God. I had to relearn everything about lovemaking. With my ex-wife, I knew exactly what pleased her. Now I just hope the next woman enjoys the same things, or at least has a good rapport with her body. I worried I rushed back into dating too soon. Arriving at her house with wine, flowers, and a stuffed animal for Mia, I aimed to win her favor. When Missy opened the door, I was taken aback. Her curly red hair cascaded around her shoulders, complemented by just the right amount of makeup. She wore a breezy sundress, showcasing her beautiful legs. Barefoot, her hot pink toenails matched her fingernails. Do I pass the test? She teased. God, yes, I blurted before I could retract my words. She chuckled, accepting the gifts and ushering me in. With Mia engrossed in TV, I knelt beside her, offering the stuffed bear. Her apprehension turned to delight as she eagerly took it, scampering off to show Missy. Watching Mia, I reminisced about Jenny and Jill at her age, realizing how much I missed them. What's wrong? Missy inquired, snapping me from my reverie. Forced smile. Nothing. Just thinking about my daughters when they were Mia's age. Is it really that bad? She inquired. They still won't talk to me. Kathy's turned them against me, and I can't change their minds, but I'm still trying. I leave them messages every day, and I won't stop. I'm so sorry, Bill. I know this is awful for you every day, but I know they listen to my messages. I mentioned our date tonight, and Katie texted me, calling me a prick for getting to the point so quickly. Sorry, is that too fast? She bit her lip, looking cute. Maybe, I replied honestly, but I'd be happy to find out with you. She smiled, taking my hand. Dinner is ready. I hope you like pasta with meat sauce. Sounds great. Oh, I have garlic bread too. So be ready for us to make out on the couch later. Mia giggled, and I was surprised by Missy's candidness. She sensed my awkwardness and said, Bill, we're both adults, and I've known you for 3 years. I know what kind of man you are, and it doesn't take much to realize that I really like you. You're going to be a hot commodity soon, and I want to stake my claim early. Hot stuff? I quipped. Yep. You have no idea how much buzz the news of your divorce has caused at the store, honey. Your appearance on the market, so to speak, has caught the attention of many unmarried ladies. You're a handsome man in good shape. You're smart, stable. and we all know how you feel about fidelity. When I sat down at her table, I felt quite good, so I'm getting in line early, she concluded. I grasped her hand. I like you too. Mia chimed in. Sketty's my favorite. I like Sketty too. The fattier, the better, I quipped, eyeing the Parmesan cheese jar. And you must have really pungent cheese, I added jokingly. She giggled, correcting me. It's not stinky cheese, it's Parm. Stinky cheese, I teased, pretending to sniff the jar dramatically. Wow, this is really stinky cheese, Missy chuckled, shaking her head as Mia poured a generous amount over the spaghetti. During dinner, we chatted lightly. I inquired about Mia's preschool adventures, and she eagerly shared every detail. It was a delightful exchange. I soon noticed Missy's quiet contentment as she observed us. As she began clearing plates, she joked, She hasn't shared her favorite TV shows yet. After tucking Mia into bed, Missy joined me on the couch. Handing her a glass of wine, she relaxed and remarked, Being a mom is the highlight of my day. But moments like these are precious. I instinctively embraced her, and she nestled closer. It's even busier with two, I admitted. Do you think your girls will come around? She asked. I hope so, I answered, reflecting on their situation. She kissed my cheek and encouraged me not to give up the fight for them. Setting down her glass, Missy leaned back. Bill, I've made it clear that I really like you. I'm too old to play games. I want to continue seeing you, and that includes inviting you into my life carnally. I started to interject, but she raised a finger. I know you want to be a gentleman, but you don't have to be. I'm not looking for casual flings. I want an exclusive relationship. My daughter needs a father figure, and I need a husband. That's what I'm offering. I attempted to speak again, only to be met with resistance once more. Typically, guys bolt after this conversation. I don't see you as that type, but I'm offering you an out. If you're looking to play the field, I'm not your match. But if you're interested in building something lasting, then I'm here. Impressive, I remarked. Was that rehearsed or spontaneous? She frowned, misunderstanding my reaction. Missy, we've had a professional relationship for 3 years. Our recent coffee meetups have been enjoyable. I'm a family man. I've always been. I don't know how to navigate the single scene, and the idea of dating terrifies me. If my wife hadn't strayed, I'd still be happily married. No, I'm not interested in that lifestyle. She smiled, taking my hand. You're charming, intelligent, and your spaghetti is fantastic. We shared a laugh, and she playfully nudged my shoulder. I'd like you to be my boyfriend. Let's build something meaningful together, including with your daughter. That night, we refrained from intimacy. Despite the temptation, I opted to take things slow, respecting both our feelings. A stroke of luck came my way when I received an application for a managerial position. Though I never learned the name of the individual who contributed to the demise of my marriage, fate intervened when he applied for the night manager role. Recognizing him instantly, I orchestrated his hiring, anticipating the opportunity for payback. On his second night, I left a 40-inch TV in his car, identical to mine, knowing it would likely be out of stock by morning. I arrived as his shift ended, walking him to his car while discussing his team. Upon noticing the TV in his back seat, I feigned surprise. Jeff, did you buy that TV today? We're not open yet. No, Bill, it's not mine. I have no idea how it got there. Let's head back to the store, I suggested, to which he reluctantly agreed. Back at the store, his fear was palpable. With no night security due to our night crew, I easily disabled the security system, covering the camera with tape. When he saw the system malfunctioning, he grew frantic, insisting on his innocence as I contacted the police. Despite hoping for harsher consequences, he received a misdemeanor in community service. The corporation, finally acknowledging security gaps, installed parking lot cameras. He never suspected my involvement and unsuccessfully attempted to blame his team. His termination was swift and unsurprising. One chilly Saturday morning, a week after my dinner with Missy, I found her waiting in the car to keep warm. As I parked next to her, she greeted me with a kiss and confirmed our dinner plans for the night. Absolutely, I replied. Okay, I have something special I'm cooking for us. You won't want to miss it, she added. Before I could respond, Katie's interruption came from behind me. Missy, visibly irritated, addressed her. Katie, what do you want? I asked, growing annoyed. I've been trying to call you. Did you block my number? Yeah, after your 30 messages about how I'm an prick for continuing to live. I'm done. What do you want? We need to talk about the girls in college, Katie insisted. They can go wherever they want. I've handled the finances for them. I'd like to be involved, but thanks to you poisoning them against me, they won't talk to me, I replied. Katie suggested the girls feared I wouldn't pay their tuition. Missy interjected with a laugh. I lost them in the divorce. This retort earned her a glare from Katie, who then blamed me for not forgiving her one slip-up. You cost me my marriage, my family, my daughters, and my mother. You better never date again. If I find out, you'll never see a second date, I warned. Missy's rebuttal was sharp. No one wants to date a cheating strumpet unless they're looking for easy lovemaking. I headed towards the store, but heard shouting behind me. Glancing back, I saw Missy confronting Katie, pinning her against the car. "Stay away from my man!" Missy yelled, jabbing her finger. I intervened, pulling Missy away. "Stop it, Missy! She's not worth it!" "You heard me," Katie retorted, storming off. "Please, Katie, just go. It's over between us, and it's your fault," I said, leaving her sobbing by the car. Catching up to Missy, I took her hand. "I'm sorry, Bill. I got too territorial," she admitted. "No worries. Parking lot fights are great for the ego," I joked, and we went inside, laughing. Later, my mom called, but the call cut off abruptly. Concerned, I rushed to her house, ignoring Missy's calls. Arriving, I found the ambulance gone. She'd passed away before reaching the hospital. Alone in the ER lobby, I pondered her last words. Then Missy called. "Hey, my mom just passed away." "Oh, Bill, I'm deeply sorry to hear that. Yes, thank you. I'm worried I won't be much company tonight." "No worries, I'll be there for you." "You need me. Please let me come over." "All right, yes." Expressing my reluctance to be alone, I was grateful she agreed to keep me company. "I'm heading home now. I'll meet you there after you finish up." "All right, I'll be there soon." After finishing my conversation, I drove to my old house instead of heading home. I felt compelled to speak to my daughters, regardless of their willingness to see me. Arriving, I noticed both of their cars parked in the driveway, feeling a wave of apprehension. Entering through the garage, I was relieved not to find Kathy's car, as I wasn't ready to face her. The downstairs rooms were empty, so I made my way upstairs to the bedrooms. "Daddy!" Jill exclaimed as I entered her room. "What's up?" shouted Jenny, following behind me. "Did you come here to beg? Well, you can leave," Jill retorted. "Grandma had a heart attack and passed away this morning," I interjected. They both gasped. I felt it was important to share this news in person. "Now I feel like I've damned myself," I added. I exited and shut the door, ignoring Jenny's call to wait, and drove off. I headed to the small lake where we once shared joyous moments. Despite the chilly weather, the tranquil waters brought solace. Seated at a picnic bench, tears welled up again, not just for my mother, but for the estrangement from my daughters. Jenny's anger conveyed all I needed to know. Doubts crept in about my past actions, not with Katie, but with my girls. What had I done to earn their resentment? Katie's betrayal had shattered our family, yet my daughters couldn't see it. Lost in thought, I heard footsteps nearing. Turning, I found Katie and the girls approaching. "How did you find me here?" I turned back to the lake. "You forgot to turn off our Find My Phone app," Kathy replied. "Bill, I'm sorry about your mom," she added. "Yeah," I muttered. "Do you regret her pass away or turning her against me?" She fell silent. "Leave me alone. I can't deal with your stuff right now," I said. "I'll never forgive you." The last time we spoke, she insisted she wouldn't talk to me until I backed out of the divorce. She didn't even say she loved me before hanging up. "I'm so sorry, Bill," she said before leaving. Then Jenny spoke up. "Dad, we're sorry too. Please forgive us for being rude." They both rushed over to hug me and we cried together. "It's not my fault, girls. Your mother's actions broke us apart," I said. "We're sorry, Dad," Jill said. "We just wanted you to forgive her. She loves you. It's obvious." "Not enough to stay faithful," I replied. "Jill, I'm sorry, girls," I said tearfully. We hugged again while Kathy watched from the car. "Girls, I need you. You'll leave for college soon and I'll miss you. We're wasting time," I said. "We understand, Daddy," Jenny said. "We won't shut you out anymore." "I wish Grandma had the chance to do the same," Jill added. "Can we come with you, Daddy? We haven't seen your new house yet. Maybe we could grab pizza." "Sure, let your mom know, and let's head out." As I pulled into my driveway, I spotted Missy's car. I had forgotten she was coming. "Looks like you'll meet Missy," I told the girls. "Is she your girlfriend?" they asked simultaneously, making me chuckle. "Yeah, well, we just started dating." Look at him blushing. "So cute, Jenny." They dashed out of the car and bombarded Missy with questions, leaving her bewildered. "Girls, give her a break. Help her inside, and I'll introduce you properly." They kissed my cheek and hurried to the garage while I approached Missy. "Sorry about that," I said. She opened the door with a radiant smile and kissed my cheek. "Your daughters?" she asked. I nodded. "Come on, let's make proper introductions." "I hope I look okay." "I must look awful." "You're fine. They'll like you, Jenny." "Jill, meet Missy," I said. They embraced Jenny and cheekily declared, "You're super hot." Jill exclaimed, "Good for you, Daddy." Missy laughed, leaving me too stunned to respond. "Let's do a quick tour of the house. Then I need to handle some things for Grandma's services. Bill, I'll order pizza while you show them around." "Perfect. You read my mind." "Ooh," the girls cooed. As Missy smiled, I made the decision to wait until the next morning to inform others about my mom's passing. I'll draft an obituary for Monday's paper and share service details on Facebook. Tomorrow evening, after visiting the funeral home, we spent hours sharing stories about my mom and my girls, with a few embarrassing tales about myself thrown in to keep Missy entertained. It wasn't my fault I slipped on the wet pier and fell into the lake. Before we knew it, it was already 10. "Girls, time is slipping away and it's getting late," I remarked. They frowned and asked if they could stay the night. "I don't have beds for the guest rooms yet," I explained. "Tell you what, I'll pick you up in the morning, and we'll go out for breakfast." "Okay, and if you don't mind, we could help sort through Grandma's things too," Jill offered. "Thank you," I replied. "Missy, would you like to join us for a ride, or do you need to go home to Mia? She's staying with my parents." Jill's curiosity piqued. "Who's Mia?" "Mia is my 4-year-old daughter," I revealed. Excited, they both squealed, expressing their eagerness to meet her. Missy chuckled at their enthusiasm. "Someday soon, I promise." As we returned to my house, Missy commented, "They're great girls. I'm glad you were able to reconnect with them." I sighed. "Me too. I just wish it didn't take my mom's passing to bring us back together." With Missy nestled in my arms, I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I awoke to find Missy still snuggled against me under a blanket. Feeling a sense of longing for closeness, I kissed her head and apologized for falling asleep. She moaned, stretching. "It's okay, baby. You've had a very emotional day. Would you like to join me and the girls for breakfast?" "Only if I can bring Mia. My parents have plans this morning." "Of course, my daughters will love her." Needing to fetch Mia, I arranged to meet my daughters at IHOP. As I walked in holding Mia's hand, my girls rushed over. They embraced Mia, twirled her in the air, and showered her with kisses, making her squeal and giggle with joy. "We need to go to the bathroom," the girls announced in unison. "We'll take her," they said, whisking Mia away. "I don't know, Missy. Do you think they'll get along?" I asked, smirking. She playfully clapped me on the shoulder and kissed my cheek. "I hope they remain friends for years to come." Although it was just our first date, she expressed a long-term commitment, which was a bit surprising but reassuring. As we ate, Mia and my daughters chatted incessantly about everything. Mia showed genuine interest in their lives, peppering them with questions. My daughters, accustomed to babysitting, engaged effortlessly with Mia, bonding over shared interests in kids' shows and movies. Surprisingly, they also got along well with Missy, showing no hostility or anger toward her, unlike their initial reaction to my dating. This puzzled me, and I planned to discuss it with them later. After a busy day of phone calls, cleaning my mom's house, and visiting the funeral home, I finally relaxed when the girls returned for dinner, and Missy and Mia went their separate ways. During breakfast, Missy suggested avoiding the emotional strain of Mia's questions while sorting out my mom's house. "Daddy, are you in love with Missy?" Jenny asked abruptly. "We've only seen each other a few times outside of work. It's too early to say it's love." "Okay, Dad," Jill said, sounding like I was clueless. "You know those cartoons where girls get dreamy-eyed and hearts flutter? That's Missy when she looks at you," Jill said before I could object. They exchanged looks and then declared, "We like her." I went from joy to anger. Setting my pizza down, I headed to the sink to cool off. "Daddy," Jenny asked, "how could you shut me out all this time and now say you like my girlfriend? What did I do to deserve this? Do you know how many times I cried after leaving you messages you didn't care to hear?" "Mom made us what?" I exclaimed. Jill explained, "It began when Mom said if you felt distant, you could return to her, and we'd be a family again. We're truly sorry." Turning to Jenny, I saw her eyes tear up, and she rushed to hug me. "Dad, we're so sorry." "When that didn't work, she said you abandoned us and wouldn't pay for college because we wanted you to stay with her. She claimed your messages during the divorce were just tactics to win favor with the judge." "You believed her?" "Dad, imagine sitting with her every day, hearing her defend one mistake against 20 years of love. We thought you were being unfair. What if it was you? Would you forgive your boyfriend for cheating? No response. Where's the line? I demanded. Unclear. Give me a clear answer. They wept, and our hug calmed me. I've missed you both so much, I said. After they professed their love, I reminded them, time to go home. School's tomorrow. Make sure your mom tells them about the wake and funeral. You'll need time off this week. One last embrace. Then I watched them drive off, feeling warmth inside. Looking at the sky, I whispered, Mom, you didn't have to leave to bring my girls back, but thank you. I'll miss you. Wakes are always hard for me. Being near a deceased body is unsettling. My mom's wake was especially tough. Approaching her casket brought me solace, seeing her peaceful face. I knew she'd reunite with my late father, who avoided wakes. Mom planned hers meticulously, even choosing the casket. It was a relief knowing she had everything sorted. Chatting with one of her friends, Katie and my daughters arrived. Tearful hugs from the girls greeted me, while Katie stepped aside respectfully. After the prayer, Kathy placed something in the casket, then sat alone at the back. I saw it was a photo of Kathy, me, and my mom, all holding our babies, beaming. Touched, I took the photo and put it by my mom's hands, tears welling up. During the service, Kathy stayed seated at the back, chatting with everyone. Her bond with family members and their affection for her showed her enduring presence in our lives. The standard rule was for immediate family to sit in the front row, but it didn't feel right. Seeing Katie at the back, tears in her eyes. I knew Mom wouldn't have wanted it that way. Walking over, I invited her to join us. Come here. No need to hide. She hugged me gratefully, whispering a thank you. Back in front, my Uncle John offered her his seat, earning Missy's praise. Holding Missy's hand while my ex-wife was nearby felt surreal. I hoped it wouldn't cause trouble later. As we said goodbye to the last visitors, Kathy thanked me for welcoming her into the family, offering to share the limo ride. Missy's hand on my waist, I feared tension, but Katie's departure eased it. Let's get you home, Missy said, embracing me. In the kitchen, relieved the day was over, I handed Missy a cold beer. She thought things went well with Kathy. Yeah, I'm glad. I half expected her to cause trouble with you. The girls probably helped. We'll be okay after tomorrow. I hoped she was right. Maybe I was just paranoid about Katie and Missy. Will you stay over tonight? She squeezed my hand. You couldn't kick me out if you tried. We didn't make love, but her presence brought the best sleep since the divorce. You're keeping a close eye on me. I won't misuse your kindness by starting a fight, Kathy remarked as we waited for the service to begin. I know I lied. I just feel uneasy about it. She snorted, adding, How do you think I feel? I'm an outcast here, a disgrace. I frowned. No one sees you that way, especially not today. I'm sorry, Bill. I wish I could undo it all. I wish, she said, tears welling up before hurrying off to the bathroom. It's tough for all of us, Bill. My mother's friend Jean comforted me, patting my shoulder. Your mom was wonderful, and we'll all miss her. I kissed her cheek, grateful that Kathy had her mom to support her through the tears. After the funeral, we gathered at my mother's favorite Polish restaurant. Kathy looked uneasy as she searched for a seat. Taking her hand, I guided her to the table where Missy and my daughters sat. Kathy will always be family. Despite the divorce, no matter where we sit, you're always welcome. A tear rolled down her cheek as she thanked me, and in that moment, I felt like I'd finally let go of the pain she caused. Life moved on. The girls Skype with me weekly while they're at college. Missy and I are going strong, and I'm considering popping the question soon. Katie and I don't talk much, but it's always friendly. She's moving on too, dating a nice divorced dad who's a friend of one of the girls. I wish them the best. Some may say I should forgive her one mistake, but I can't. I may be seen as the villain by some, but I'm at peace with myself.
I never thought I'd be one of those guys sharing their life story online, especially not about something like this. But here I am, because, honestly, I don't want anyone else to end up in the same twisted mess I did. My name's Jack. I'm 35 years old, and I've been married to Emma for 10 years. A whole decade with this woman. We met back in college, seems like a lifetime ago now. She was something else back then, a real spark of energy. She could walk into any room, and it'd feel like the whole place lit up just because she was there. I was just the lucky guy standing by her side, grinning like an idiot because I couldn't believe someone like her even looked my way. Things were good between us, or at least that's what I thought. Our friends would always tell us we were the perfect couple. Hell, even I bought into that image for a long time. We had what I thought was a solid marriage, shared jokes, some wild nights out, and a few quiet ones at home. That's the way it's supposed to be, right? You build a life together, go through the motions, and figure you'll stick it out because you've made it this far. But man, I should have seen the cracks long before they split wide open. It wasn't like one day she just up and changed. No, it was more subtle than that. Looking back now, I can see the signs that I chose to ignore, those little moments when you feel something's off, but you brush it aside, convincing yourself it's nothing. I think part of me just didn't want to admit it. I mean, we'd been together for 10 years. That's not something you throw away on a whim, right? The first thing that started to feel off was her work schedule. Emma had always worked long hours, but lately, she was coming home even later than usual. I'd ask her about it, and she'd give me the usual excuses. Oh, just another late-night meeting, or David and I are working on a project, and it's running long. David. That name makes me want to punch a wall now, but back then, I didn't think anything of it. He was just some guy she worked with, or so I thought. At first, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? But it started happening more and more often. She'd come home late, sometimes well past midnight, and she'd be distant, like her mind was somewhere else, anywhere but with me. We'd barely talk, and when we did, the conversations were shallow. Nothing of substance, just the usual, "How was your day?" kind of crap. And when it came to intimacy, well, that was practically non-existent. It was like we were living as roommates, not as a married couple. We'd sleep in the same bed, but there was this invisible wall between us, and I couldn't figure out why. I started second-guessing myself. Maybe I was just overthinking it. Maybe work was stressing her out. Maybe I wasn't doing enough. You can really drive yourself crazy with all the maybes. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to admit it. And then came the day that everything changed. It was a regular afternoon, nothing special. I was working from home, trying to organize some files on our shared laptop, something we both used for work. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I wasn't even thinking about it. But as I was going through some folders, I stumbled upon an email. The subject line wasn't anything suspicious, just some work-related bullshit. But something made me open it, and when I did, it was like a punch to the gut. The email was from David, her colleague. But it wasn't about work. Oh no, it was far from that. The contents were explicit, to say the least. Romantic, sure, but mostly sexual. The kind of stuff you don't write to someone unless you're screwing them. I felt my blood run cold as I read line after line of his disgusting words. He wasn't just some colleague. He was the guy my wife was fucking behind my back. The worst part? She wasn't even trying to hide it. I sat there for what felt like hours, just staring at the screen, my mind racing. I could feel the rage boiling inside me, but there was something else too, something darker. I wanted to hurt her. I wanted her to feel the same pain I was feeling at that moment. But I couldn't just explode. Not yet. If I was going to confront her, I needed more. I needed to know how long this had been going on, how deep it went. I couldn't just go off half-cocked with nothing but an email. So, I did what any guy with a brain full of suspicion and a heart full of betrayal would do. I decided to gather evidence. I wanted to see it all, every call, every message, every dirty little secret. I wanted the full picture, not just some half-baked confrontation where she could lie her way out of it. I installed spyware on her phone and email. I'm not proud of it, but at that point, I didn't care. Trust was already dead. If she was going to betray me, I was damn sure going to know every last detail. The program let me see everything: texts, emails, phone calls, all of it. I could even listen in on her conversations if I wanted to. It was like having a front row seat to the car crash that was my marriage. From that day on, I lived a double life. I'd act normal around her, smile, laugh, pretend everything was fine, while secretly checking the spyware every chance I got. I watched in real time as she sent messages to David, planning their next meeting. I could see the texts, the flirty emojis, the sexual innuendos. It was like watching her fall in love with someone else right in front of my eyes, and I couldn't do a damn thing about it. The worst part? I had to pretend like I didn't know. I had to sit there, at the dinner table, listening to her talk about her long day at work, knowing full well she'd been with him. Every word that came out of her mouth felt like a lie, and it made me sick. But I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. I wasn't sharing this story for sympathy. No, I'm sharing it because I know there are guys out there, just like me, sitting on their couch, completely clueless while their wives are out there screwing someone else. Trust me, I didn't think it'd happen to me either. But it did. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. Once I started monitoring Emma's phone, it didn't take long for the truth to unravel. What I found wasn't just some casual fling or a recent mistake, it was a full-blown affair that had been going on for over a year. A fucking year. Can you imagine that? 12 months of lies, deceit, and betrayal, all right under my nose. And the worst part? They were incredibly good at covering their tracks. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. They had a system, a well-oiled machine of secrecy. Through the spyware, I found out they were meeting in hotels during so-called business trips and conferences. Sometimes, they'd even fly out to different cities just to be together. And to make matters worse, they had a separate bank account to fund their little adventures. I watched as they booked flights, hotel rooms, expensive dinners, things Emma had never even mentioned to me. Not a single word. The pain of discovering all this was something I can't even begin to describe. It's like someone took a knife and twisted it in my gut, over and over again. And the fact that it had been going on for so long, that was the real kicker. I felt like an idiot for not seeing it sooner. But as much as I wanted to explode, as much as I wanted to confront her and tear her world apart, I couldn't. Not yet. We had 2 daughters, Lily and Sarah. They didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of this mess. I had to be smart. I needed time to figure out my next move. Every time I looked at Emma after that, all I could see was her betrayal. She'd try to act normal around the house, like nothing was wrong, but I could see right through her. The guilt was practically seeping out of her, and I finally understood why she'd been so cold and distant lately. Every excuse she gave, I'm just stressed from work, or I'm exhausted, it was all bullshit. She wasn't stressed from work, she was stressed because she was living a double life and trying to keep it hidden. It became clear to me that David wasn't just some fling for her. He was her way of filling some emotional void that I apparently couldn't. That realization hurt even more than the affair itself. I was being replaced, not just physically but emotionally, too. It was like I wasn't enough anymore, like the life we had built together wasn't enough. And despite her attempts to appear loving at home, I could see the cracks. I could see the guilt weighing her down, but she was too far gone to turn back. But even with all that, I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I wanted to be calculated about it. I wanted to make sure that when the time came, I had all the power in my hands. No rash decisions, no heated arguments where she could twist things around and make me look like the bad guy. No, I needed to make sure that when I struck, it would be final. In the meantime, I played the role of the oblivious husband. I kept things as normal as possible for the sake of the kids. I'd help Lily with her homework, take Sarah to soccer practice, and do all the fatherly things I had always done. I couldn't let them see the cracks in our marriage just yet. They were too young to understand the kind of storm that was brewing, and I wasn't about to let Emma's actions tear apart their world. Not until I was ready to make my move. But every day, it was getting harder to keep up the act. Every time I saw Emma on her phone, I knew she was probably texting David. Every time she worked late or went out with friends, I knew where she really was. And it killed me. I'd lie in bed next to her, knowing she had just come back from fucking another man, and I'd have to pretend like everything was fine. It wasn't just anger that was eating me alive, it was the sense of betrayal on every level. I had trusted this woman with everything. My heart, my life, my children. And in return, she was giving herself to another man. I could have confronted her right then and there, thrown everything in her face, but I didn't. I stayed silent. I needed more time. I needed to plan my revenge. And so, I waited. Watched. Bided my time. Every move Emma made, I was right there, 2 steps ahead of her, gathering more evidence, letting her dig her own grave without even realizing it. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. When the time came, she would pay for every lie, every secret, every betrayal. Once I made up my mind to play the long game, I knew I couldn't let anything slip. Emma needed to believe she was in control, that she had me fooled. So, I played my part, a loving, attentive husband who hadn't a clue what his wife was up to. It wasn't easy, but I had to make it believable. I stayed patient, gave her space when she needed it, acted like her late nights didn't bother me. I even started initiating conversations about her work, asking how her meetings were going. Every time she lied straight to my face, I smiled and nodded, but inside, it was like pouring gasoline on the fire. But I wasn't just sitting around letting her get away with it. Behind the scenes, I was putting everything into motion. First, I started moving some money into a private account. Nothing too obvious, just little amounts here and there. I wasn't about to leave myself vulnerable when the shit hit the fan. I knew I'd need a financial safety net once I pulled the trigger on the divorce. I kept gathering evidence, too. Every text, every call, every goddamn detail of her affair with David. I saved everything, screenshots, emails, even photos. I wanted to make sure that when the time came, there'd be no way for her to deny it. She wouldn't be able to twist the story or play the victim. I had the receipts, and I was going to use them. One of the smartest things I did was hire a divorce lawyer early on. I consulted with him in secret, told him everything, and he laid out the best plan of attack. It wasn't just about getting out of the marriage, it was about making sure I didn't get screwed in the process. He helped me put together a plan, and part of that plan involved timing. We decided to wait, to build the case until it was airtight, and then hit her with the divorce papers when she least expected it. But here's where things got interesting. I knew David had a wife, Rachel. I'd seen her around at school functions, PTA meetings, that kind of thing. She seemed nice enough, a bit distant, but who could blame her? She was married to a guy like David. I figured she deserved to know the truth, but I wasn't about to just drop a bomb on her out of the blue. No, I had to be more strategic than that. I needed her on my side. I started arranging playdates for our kids, Lily and Sarah with Rachel's kids, who went to the same school. At first, it was just casual. We'd chat while the kids played, nothing too deep. I wanted to earn her trust, get her comfortable around me. Slowly, I started dropping little hints here and there, subtle things, like Emma's been working a lot of late nights with David lately. Must be exhausting for them. Or, funny how work can pull people in different directions. Nothing too obvious, just enough to plant a seed of doubt in her mind. I could see the wheels turning, even though she didn't say much at first. It didn't take long before Rachel started to get suspicious. You could tell by the way she'd look at her phone when David wasn't around, or the way her smile faltered when I'd bring up work. I knew she was starting to piece things together, but she needed that final push. And that's when I gave her what she needed, proofs. I showed her some of the evidence I'd gathered. Just enough to confirm her worst fears without overwhelming her. Texts between Emma and David, a few suggestive messages, plans for hotel rooms. I didn't lay it all out at once, but it was enough. Rachel's face went pale, and I could see the heartbreak hit her like a freight train. She didn't scream or cry, though. She just sat there, staring at the screen, her hands trembling. I had a feeling something was off, she whispered. I just didn't want to believe it. I felt for her, I really did. I knew what she was going through, hell, I was going through it myself. But there was also a part of me that was cold, calculating. I needed her to be on my side for what came next. Rachel was going to be my secret weapon. And together, we were going to burn them both to the ground. I wasn't just aiming for a clean break. No, that would have been too easy. I wanted them to suffer the way I had, to feel the weight of their betrayal crush down on them like it had on me. Divorce wasn't enough. Exposing them, making sure the whole damn world saw them for what they truly were, that was my endgame. Months of preparation had led to this moment. Rachel and I had carefully planned every move, every word, every detail. We knew exactly what we were doing. Emma and David thought they were in the clear, that their little affair was still safely tucked away in the shadows. But we were about to drag it into the light, and there would be no coming back from it. It all started with our anniversary. 10 years of marriage. 10 years down the drain, and she didn't even see it coming. I suggested we take a romantic weekend getaway to reconnect. I laid it on thick, flowers, a sweet note, everything she'd want to hear. I could see the guilt in her eyes when I brought it up. She hesitated for a second, probably wondering how she was going to juggle me and David that weekend. But she agreed. How could she say no to a doting husband who wanted to rekindle the flame? Meanwhile, Rachel set things in motion on her end. She arranged for David to go on a business trip, something Emma was used to by now. It was almost too perfect. David wouldn't even think twice. We picked a hotel not too far away, one they'd be comfortable sneaking off to, as they had so many times before. The stage was set. The night of the trip, everything fell into place. Emma and I checked into the hotel, but I wasn't planning on spending a single minute there with her. Rachel and I had been keeping tabs on David and Emma, and we knew exactly where they'd end up. I made some excuse to Emma about needing to handle a work call, and I slipped out of the room. My heart was pounding, but my mind was sharp. This was it. Rachel was already waiting in the hotel lobby when I got there. We exchanged a silent nod, both of us knowing what was about to happen. We made our way to the room where David and Emma were supposed to meet, adrenaline rushing through my veins. I had the camera ready, no way were they talking their way out of this. We waited for what felt like an eternity in that hallway. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From anger. From months of holding this shit in, from pretending like everything was fine while they fucked around behind our backs. And then, we saw them. Emma and David arrived separately, as they always did. First David, then Emma, slipping into the hotel room like it was their own private playground. They didn't have a clue that their whole world was about to come crashing down. Rachel and I gave them a few minutes to settle in, just enough time for them to drop their guard, to feel safe. Then, without warning, we burst into the room. The look on their faces was priceless. Emma's eyes went wide with shock, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. David froze, completely dumbfounded. They didn't even have time to cover themselves up properly. It was a perfect snapshot of their pathetic little secret life. I could see the panic wash over Emma as she realized what was happening, but it was too late. I made sure the camera caught every second. I kept my voice cold, detached, as I spoke. Surprise. I've known for a long time, Emma. I've known about all of it. She tried to stammer out some sort of excuse, but I wasn't interested. The time for lies was over. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. She couldn't even look me in the eye, and that's when I knew this was it. She knew the game was over. There was no wriggling her way out of this one. She'd been caught, and there was nothing left to say. Rachel, too, stood there silently, her expression as icy as mine. David had this ridiculous, deer-in-the-headlights look on his face, like he couldn't believe this was happening. Honestly, I think he was more worried about what Rachel would do than the fact that I was standing there recording the whole thing. I made sure to get everything on tape, every word, every reaction, every moment of their humiliation. Emma could barely speak, and when she did try to open her mouth, I cut her off with a wave of my hand. "Save it," I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "You don't get to explain anything." In that moment, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. Months of anger, pain, and betrayal had led me to this point, and now that I was here, now that I had exposed them, I felt detached. I had been preparing for this for so long that when it finally happened, it was like watching someone else's life unfold in front of me. There was no screaming, no yelling, no drama. Just the cold, hard reality of what they had done, laid bare for all of us to see. Emma stood there, frozen in place, while David fumbled for words, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. But there was nothing they could say or do to change what had happened. Rachel and I walked out of that hotel room without another word. We didn't need to stay and watch them scramble for explanations or beg for forgiveness. We had what we came for, proof. They couldn't deny it anymore. The truth was out, and there was no hiding from it. As we left, I knew that this was just the beginning. The divorce was next, and with the evidence I had, Emma didn't stand a chance. But at that moment, walking away from that hotel room, I felt like I had already won. After that night at the hotel, I knew it wouldn't be long before Emma came crawling back, trying to salvage whatever was left of her shattered life. And sure enough, a few days later, she came to me, her eyes red and swollen from crying, pleading for forgiveness. "Jack, please," she sobbed, standing in our kitchen, the place where we used to share meals, now a battlefield for the broken remains of our marriage. "It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking clearly. I still love you. We can fix this." Her words felt hollow. A mistake? A year-long affair, multiple hotels, secret trips, and a hidden bank account, that wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate betrayal. And as for love? Whatever love we had once shared had been obliterated the moment she decided to give herself to someone else. I looked at her, feeling nothing but cold detachment. "You didn't make a mistake, Emma. You made a choice. Every time you met with him, every lie you told, that was your decision. You didn't love me then, and I doubt you love me now." Her face crumpled, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her weasel her way back into my life with apologies and crocodile tears. This wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about closure and consequences. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the divorce papers I had been carrying for days. The look on her face when I handed them to her was almost satisfying. Shock, disbelief, horror, it all flashed across her features in an instant. "Sign them," I said, my voice steady. "We're done." She looked down at the papers, her hands trembling. "Jack, please, don't do this. We can work through this. I'll go to therapy, I'll do anything you want." I shook my head. "There's nothing left to work through. You killed our marriage, and I'm not interested in trying to revive something that's already dead." She didn't argue anymore. She just stood there, clutching the divorce papers like they were a lifeline she couldn't grasp. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her alone with the wreckage she had created. The fallout was swift. Rachel didn't waste any time either. She filed for divorce from David the very next day. The scandal spread through our social circle like wildfire, and soon enough, everyone knew what had happened. David lost his job. Turns out, sleeping with a colleague's wife isn't exactly great for corporate reputation. As for Emma, her social standing was obliterated. Our mutual friends distanced themselves from her, and whispers about her affair followed her everywhere she went. It was almost poetic. While I had been the one left humiliated and betrayed, now it was Emma and David who were on the receiving end of public shame. Their little secret had been exposed for all to see, and there was no hiding from it. But what mattered most to me wasn't the gossip or the ruined reputations. It was my kids, Lily and Sarah. I wasn't going to let Emma drag them into this mess. I had gathered more than enough evidence to ensure that I would get full custody, and when it came time for the court hearings, that's exactly what happened. The judge didn't even blink before awarding me full custody of both of our children, citing Emma's infidelity and lack of stability. Watching Emma's face as the judge read the decision was a moment I'll never forget. She looked devastated, like everything she had fought to hold on to was slipping away. And in a way, it was. She had lost me, lost her social standing, and now she had lost the most important thing of all, our kids. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had fought my battle and won, and now it was time to move on. When it was all said and done, I stood on the other side of the storm, victorious. The divorce settlement had gone exactly as planned. I kept the family home, the place where Lily and Sarah had grown up, the place that still had the echoes of a time when life felt whole. I walked away with primary custody of my daughters, ensuring they'd stay with me, away from the chaos that Emma had caused. And Emma? She was left with scraps, a small apartment and visitation rights. Everything she thought she'd keep, she lost. It wasn't just about the money or the house, it was about the fact that she'd thrown away her family for nothing. I had spent months preparing for this, setting the stage for my victory, and it had paid off. Financially, I was secure, but more than that, I had come out on top emotionally. I didn't just survive the betrayal, I reclaimed my life from it. Every piece of evidence, every cold, calculated move, had been worth it in the end. I had made sure that I wouldn't be the one left picking up the pieces. Emma, on the other hand, struggled. After the affair became public knowledge, she was ostracized, left to face the consequences of her actions alone. David was out of the picture, his life in ruins after losing his job and his own marriage. He had been nothing more than a temporary thrill for her, a distraction from whatever emptiness she felt. And now, she had to live with that emptiness, isolated and left to figure out where she had gone wrong. It wasn't my problem anymore. I had no regrets. The pain she had caused me was real, but so was the strength I found in rebuilding my life. I focused on being a father to Lily and Sarah, making sure they knew that they were loved and protected. The time I spent with them was the most important part of my day now, and watching them grow, seeing them laugh and play, gave me the sense of purpose I thought I had lost. For the first time in a long while, I started trusting myself again. I realized that Emma's betrayal hadn't broken me, it had made me stronger. I had come out of this nightmare with my dignity intact, something Emma could never say for herself. She had been reduced to a shadow of the woman I once knew, someone desperately trying to rebuild a life she had single-handedly destroyed. In the end, my revenge wasn't about destroying her, it was about reclaiming what she had tried to take from me, my sense of self, my confidence, my future. By playing the long game, by staying patient and calculating, I didn't just win the divorce. I won my life back. I had shown Emma that her betrayal wasn't the end for me, it was the beginning of something better. I'm sharing this story not because I'm proud of what happened, but because I want others to know that you can come out the other side. Betrayal like that feels like it's going to tear you apart, but if you're smart, if you stay focused, you can rebuild. You can reclaim your life, just like I did. In the end, her downfall wasn't my victory, it was hers. Because she chose it. All I did was make sure she couldn't drag me down with her. It's been a year since everything went down, and I figured I'd give you all an update. A lot has changed in my life, and I honestly never thought I'd be in such a good place after everything that happened. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd come out of this stronger, happier, and more at peace, I probably wouldn't have believed you. First off, I've been doing well, better than I expected, to be honest. After the dust settled, I focused on rebuilding my life, and that meant putting all my energy into being the best father I can be for Lily and Sarah. They're both doing great, by the way. They've adjusted to the changes much faster than I thought they would. I think the stability of staying in the family home helped, and I've made sure they know they're loved, no matter what. Emma, as you might have guessed, isn't really part of our lives anymore. She's got her visitation rights, but the relationship between her and the girls has been strained, to say the least. I don't encourage or discourage it. I let them make their own decisions, and right now, they're not too interested in spending much time with her. I think they're still processing everything. Emma's been trying to get her life back on track, but from what I hear, it's not going too well. She's still dealing with the fallout from the affair, and it doesn't seem like she's made much progress. As for me, I've moved on. I won't lie, there were some tough days. Days where I felt the weight of everything that happened and wondered if I'd ever feel normal again. But with time, I started to heal. I've been seeing someone, actually. We've been together for a few months now, and it's been good. I won't get into too many details, but she's been a breath of fresh air in my life. There's no drama, no secrets, just honesty and support, which is exactly what I needed. Work's been steady, and I've found myself putting more focus on the future. I've been saving up, planning a few trips with the girls. We've already done one to the beach, and seeing them laugh and play in the sand without a care in the world was one of the best moments I've had in a long time. I want to give them the kind of childhood they deserve, one that isn't clouded by the mess of their parents' past. Looking back, I don't regret how everything played out. If anything, I'm grateful for it. It forced me to reevaluate my life, to focus on what really matters. Emma's betrayal hurt like hell, but it didn't define me. It gave me a chance to rebuild, to come out stronger, and to show my daughters that no matter what life throws at you, you can always rise above it. So yeah, I'm doing well. Better than I thought possible a year ago. Thanks to everyone who followed my story and offered support. It helped more than you know. If you're going through something similar, just know, it gets better. You just have to keep moving forward.
My wife cheated and asked for an open marriage, so I divorced her, got my revenge, and moved on. I was jogging on the path between my small office and my house, roughly 2 miles away, spurred by frustration with some unfinished work tasks. After tinkering with it for about an hour, I swapped my jeans and work shirt for shorts, a t-shirt, sneakers, and a headband, and set off. My plan was to jog home to retrieve some paperwork, maybe 20 pages. When I was about half a mile from home, I spotted a guy about 200 yards ahead, an uncommon sight, since this path was mainly used by me and rarely by others. Leading directly to my house and bordered by a cliff at the back, he appeared to be cutting through toward the back of my house. Hastening my pace, I turned a corner to get a better look. He was at the back patio door, which to my surprise was unlocked. Pausing to consider what I had witnessed, I recalled that my wife Alice was working from home that day. Racing to the door, I found it locked, but naturally I had the key and used it. Silently sliding open the patio door, I peered inside. The kitchen, where Alice usually worked, was empty, but her work materials and laptop were sprawled across the table. Faint sounds emanated from upstairs, likely from the dining room adjacent to the kitchen. I kept a baton, reminiscent of those used by old-fashioned patrol officers, which had once belonged to my grandfather. It was both a tool of protection and a sentimental keepsake. Clutching the baton, I stealthily ascended the stairs. The door to the master bedroom was shut, with muffled noises emanating from within. Gripping the handle, I cautiously pushed it open. Imagine my shock. The runner's attire lay discarded on the floor as he poised to mount my wife, who was completely unclothed. Approaching the bed, I administered a swift strike to the man's rear with the baton, resulting in a resounding slap. He yelped, clutching his rear, while Alice stared wide-eyed, her arms, legs, and gaze all widened. She uttered something unintelligible. It dawned on me that this intruder was none other than her boss, Simon Green. Rolling away from Alice, he rose from the bed, nursing his injured rear. "Hold on, I was invited," he protested. Glancing at Alice, I was met with absolute silence. Simon issued a threat asserting, "You'd better back off, or I'll take it from you and give you a smacking." Standing undressed in my bedroom, he exuded confidence, yet he scarcely knew me. And I him. What he didn't realize was my proficiency in tennis, particularly my formidable backhand. Smirking at him, I detected a flicker of agitation. With a roar, he lunged at me from about 6 feet away. Swiftly, I delivered a backhand blow to his face. Caught off guard, he failed to evade it. The baton struck his forehead on the right side. I had aimed for his cheek, but his slight downward movement caused the misalignment. Collapsing like a sack of bricks, he remained motionless. As I gazed down at him, I glanced at Alice. She appeared to be in a trance, her eyes had a glassy look, and drool dribbled down her chin. Surveying the room, I spotted a cell phone on the dresser, positioned upright with the screen facing the bed. That idiot had recorded everything. Grabbing the phone, I flipped it to access the dial pad and called. "Emergency, what's your emergency?" "My name is Tim Jenkins. I'm at 12 Arbor Circle. An intruder attacked me in my bedroom. I defended myself. He's hurt, possibly seriously. And my wife, she's, I don't know, maybe on medications. She's conscious but not responsive. We need help right away. Sir, if you're armed, please disarm yourself. We'll approach cautiously. Do you understand?" "Yes, I understand. I'll wait in the front yard." As sirens wailed, I descended the stairs, phone still in hand. Placing the baton on the sofa, I stepped outside. Standing in the front yard, arms at my sides, I watched as a police car arrived, followed by an ambulance. 2 officers, a man and a woman, emerged, neither drawing their weapons. The woman, appearing to be in charge, addressed me. "Are you Mr. Jenkins?" "Yes, they're upstairs. Follow me." I turned and re-entered the house, the officers trailing behind me. Leading them to the bedroom, I stepped aside. The door was ajar. Alice lay on the bed, vacant-eyed. Green remained motionless. A female officer knelt by Green, checking his pulse and instructing another officer to summon paramedics. Turning her attention to Alice, she asked, "Ma'am, are you all right, ma'am?" No response. As the paramedics arrived, I stepped back, allowing them to attend to Green. Another group of medical personnel followed suit. Sergeant Leslie Hayden retrieved a robe from the closet, dressed Alice, and guided her to the guest bedroom, gesturing for me to follow. "Stay here. Don't leave, but keep out of the way," she directed. I retreated to the kitchen, scanning the surroundings, using a small computer from my desk drawer. I transferred the video from Green's phone and backed up its contents, sending the video to my office via email. I powered down the phone and left it on Alice's desk. From the kitchen entrance, I observed as the paramedics transported Green out the front door, loaded him into the ambulance, and sped away. An unfamiliar policewoman guided Alice to the living room, keeping her apart from me. Alice walked with her head down, clad in a robe and sneakers. Sergeant Hayden joined me in the kitchen, accompanied by the plainclothes detective, an older, slender man named John Dempster. She introduced him, though we were already acquainted. While my legal focus had shifted to civil matters, I had previously handled criminal defense cases, collaborating with Detective Dempster. I held him in high regard and felt we had a good rapport. "Hi, I'm sorry for what occurred. Do you recognize the person you struck?" Dempster asked. "My wife's boss, Simon Green." "Do you have any details about his residence?" "We have his belongings, sports gear and credit card, but no ID." "I don't know much about him, John. Last I heard, he was married with kids in school maybe a year ago. Was there any indication of a romantic involvement between him and your wife?" "Not until today." "Could you recount the events leading up to the incident?" I recounted everything, from my decision to go for a stress-relieving run to the moment I dialed emergency, leaving no detail out. I had no motive for this. "Did you recognize Green when you were outside?" "No. It wasn't until he got out of bed that I realized who he was." "You struck him on the rear?" "Yeah. I didn't intend to cause serious damage, but I wanted him away from my wife, no matter her wishes." "But then you strike him again. Why?" "As I mentioned, he threatened to take the baton and attack me with it. Then he charged at me with a roar." "Roared?" "Yeah, I guess he was trying to intimidate me. It worked." I aimed lower, not at his forehead. He must have ducked or lowered his head. "All right, your wife isn't implicated. We're testing her for medications. Once she's lucid, she should corroborate your account. You know, John, this phone belonged to Green. He likely recorded the encounter. The struggle might be captured on video. Why is it here? I used it to call emergency, then left it open when I went outside. Dempster had a crime scene tech answer it. I inquired about Alice's fate. Not certain. Let's check with Sergeant Hayden. We entered the living room, where Alice sat with an officer and a medic. Dempster asked the medic, "What's up with Mrs. Jenkins?" "We're taking her to the county hospital for precaution, as she seems in shock. Vital signs are stable." I gazed at Alice, and in that instant our eyes met. A tear trickled down her right cheek. "I'm so sorry, Timmy," she murmured. Then she appeared to drift back into a trance. "Alice! Alice!" I felt a twinge of frustration as she disconnected once more. A short while later, she was transported by ambulance. I changed into clothes from the basement and trailed behind in our car. The police were inside the house, assuring me they would secure it or leave someone behind. I phoned Alice's parents, who resided in a neighboring state about 2 hours away, giving them a brief overview and promising to update them from the hospital. Alice and I tied the knot when she was fresh out of college at 21, while I was still a year away from graduating law school. She swiftly secured a position at Simon Green's insurance firm, where she steadily climbed the ranks from clerk to administrative assistant in his department, which dealt with housing and automobiles. I accompanied her to company gatherings and never observed any hint of impropriety between them. It marked my first encounter with the Green family. She had been with the company for over 6 years now, and I believed our marriage was solid until today. While I harbored little doubt that any interaction between them had been consensual, unless he somehow dazed her, this incident would likely spell the end of our marriage. Given the circumstances, I struggled to comprehend how he could have dazed her. There simply hadn't been enough time. I assumed she was awaiting him, likely unclothed, and she had left the back door ajar. I pondered how frequently this had occurred. I adored Alice. She possessed beauty, cheerfulness, and kindness. Our lovemaking life was fulfilling, even amid busy schedules, particularly on weekends. With my shift away from criminal trials, my workload became more predictable. I couldn't comprehend what I had witnessed. While Green was physically larger, today's events suggested otherwise, at least in crucial aspects. Yet, I only caught a glimpse. Who can say for sure? At the hospital, Simon Green's wife was in the ER. Though I recognized her, she seemed oblivious to me. I left things as they were and inquired about Alice. Granted permission, I returned to her room, where she slept. I gazed at her, feeling lost. I struggled to fathom her actions and their impact on us. I felt a profound need to grasp the events before making tough decisions. A female doctor in a white robe entered the room. "I'm Dr. Moore. Are you her husband?" I nodded. "What's her condition?" "She experienced mental trauma resulting in a shock-induced loss of consciousness. Once she wakes, she's likely to regain normalcy." "When might that be?" "Possibly 3 to 4 hours, depending on the dosage." "Thank you. I'll stay here." As she prepared to depart, I halted her. "What about Simon Green? How is he?" "Any relation?" "No, just an acquaintance. Unfortunately, he's in a medically induced coma due to a severe head injury." With that, she left. I mulled over Green's fate, initially believing I had caused his demise, but now uncertain. I phoned Alice's parents and relayed what I had learned. They contemplated visiting, but I dissuaded them, explaining that Alice and I needed to address the situation, likely involving her affair with her boss. Janie Carson, Alice's mother, expressed concern, noting Alice's recent change in demeanor. She implored me to give Alice a chance to explain. "I'll do that, I promise," I replied, though it didn't seem to help much. "We'll just have to wait and see." Seeking out Mrs. Green, I located her in the ICU waiting area. "Hello, Mrs. Green." "Yes, do you have something to say?" "No, ma'am. I'm Tim Jenkins. My wife Alice works at your husband's company. It appeared they were acquainted." She was tall, slender, with brown hair in her early 30s. "Acquainted?" "Yes, they were discovered together, unclothed in my bedroom this morning, engaged in such closeness." "Ah, you're the one who struck him?" She paused. "Yes, apologies. Well, not really." She continued. "Simon has been acting oddly lately. He's neglected his usual activities, citing work. I suspect he was preoccupied with your wife. Well, I can't confirm until now. They seem to have established a routine." "What did the doctors say about his condition?" "They were non-committal. Surgery may be on the horizon." "Well, best of luck to you. Will you be taking your children?" "They're with my parents. They're aware he's in the hospital. Nothing out of the ordinary anymore." I stepped outside to catch some fresh air, hoping to clear my mind a bit. I resolved to withhold any decisions until I heard from Alice. After an hour, I returned indoors to find Alice still in the same area of the emergency room, concealed behind a curtain. Upon entering, she stirred but remained asleep. Taking a seat, I drifted off momentarily. I awoke to her stirring again, emitting faint moans. Her eyes fluttered open briefly before closing once more, accompanied by more moans. I rushed to summon help, spotting Dr. Moore at the nurse's station and signaling to her. She swiftly approached, observing Alice's condition. It appears she's awakening, though I'm unsure if my presence is warranted. Just then, Alice lost consciousness again. Please wait here, Dr. Moore instructed. She entered the enclosure and I could only hear their exchange from outside. How are you feeling, Alice? Can you speak? Alice responded weakly. God, I'm sorry. Alice, we need you fully conscious. You must acknowledge the situation and move forward. Detachment can't persist. We'll discharge you this afternoon, perhaps in 2 hours. Where's Tim? He was here earlier, but thought you might respond better if he stepped out, though he's nearby. I wonder how long this will last. I messed up badly. And Simon, how is he? Tim hit him. We're unsure of his condition. He might require surgery. Damn, I warned him against taking risks. It was a gamble. He lost. Maybe I will too. Perhaps you should talk to Tim. I can find him, or it can wait until you're home. I drew back the curtain and entered. Alice, I'll take you home soon, hopefully. Okay, thank you. I'm really sorry. We'll talk. Turning to Dr. Moore, I inquired, when can we leave? Right away. I'll handle the paperwork and provide medical attire. With that, she departed. Alice murmured, I'm sorry, Timmy. Sorry. It's not a big deal. You have to understand, we'll discuss it when we're home. As Dr. Moore presented her with a medical form, I stepped out while she changed. She seemed to interpret my departure as a rejection, and, in a way, it was. I had no inclination to witness her undressed, perhaps ever again. They wheeled her out in a wheelchair as I pulled the car up to the exit. She rose and entered the vehicle. We shared no words during the 10-minute drive, though tears streamed down her face. She remained silent. Upon arriving home, I unlocked the front door, and we stepped into what used to be our joyful abode. No police were present, and downstairs was relatively tidy. Alice settled into the rocking chair in the living room. I'll quickly check upstairs, be right back. I ascended the stairs to find chaos. Our bedroom bore the brunt, with a section of carpet removed where green had fallen. The bed lay stripped to the mattress, drawers pulled but not fully shut. I resolved to tidy up later. Other rooms appeared undisturbed, except for the bathroom, where fingerprint powder lingered. The prospect of conversing with Alice didn't appeal to me. I phoned her parents, informing them of her return. They breathed a sigh of relief but inquired about visiting. Uncertain, I clenched my teeth and descended the stairs. Would you like anything? Coffee? Water? Alice met my gaze but declined. Sitting opposite her on the sofa, we remained about 6 feet apart, silently facing each other. What happened, Alice? I thought everything was okay. It's complicated, Timmy. I've been working for Simon all these years. I've always respected him. No, it's more than that. Sometimes he made flirtatious remarks about my appearance. He started getting more touchy, placing his hand on my arm or shoulder. It caught me off guard. Then he asked me out to lunch, just the two of us. But didn't you find it odd, his sudden change in behavior? Didn't it strike you as strange? Maybe a little. She looked down. I was flattered, and he's attractive. I found myself intrigued. It took me a while to acknowledge it. So you realized he was trying to seduce you. And what did you decide? I wanted to see where it would lead. She buried her face in her hands before looking up again. And then, at that point, I knew we were in trouble. It wasn't a case of being tricked or dazed. I wanted it. We went to dinner. I asked him why he was pursuing me now after all this time. He said he'd always desired me but suppressed it. Those were his words. Tim, why? What's wrong with me that you were open to him? You're fine, Timmy. He claimed he wanted me more than you, that I was routine to you but exciting and new to him. Just the thought of it turned me on. Why didn't you talk to me about this? What could I have said? I'm considering cheating for some excitement. It never crossed my mind. How many times did you two have lovemaking? Not once. Today was supposed to be the first and only time. But then you showed up. I was terrified when I saw you, the look on your face. After you dealt with him. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was the same as always. A quick glance. Then you struck him with the baton. I figured the cops should have spoken to her first. Screw them. I had no choice. He charged at me. I saw it, but it happened so fast and ended so abruptly. Alice, I don't buy that this was the first time. I caught him sneaking in through the back door. It wasn't locked, and it didn't take me long to get inside and upstairs. But there you both were, undressed. He was inches away from having lovemaking with you. You wanted it too, so I think this isn't your first rodeo. No, Tim. Simon and I kissed in his car 2 days ago. We flirted, but I stopped him from going further. I suggested he could come over after you left for work. It all seems so improbable. Think about it. If you saw what I saw, what would you believe? Oh, you have to trust me. Or maybe not. I just don't know how to make you believe me. And now I'll never be able to trust what you say. What should I do, Alice? I love you, but I don't like Simon. He made you want him. How? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. How could you think this of me? He's forceful. He says what he wants. He wanted me, and apparently I wanted him too. Alice, I need time to process all this. If I acted on my feelings now, we'd be headed for divorce. I can't erase what I saw. Okay, she replied, tears streaming down her face. But please remember, I love you. I'm so sorry you're hurting. She said it through sobs, but I remained silent. The woman I loved would never do this. You're not her, I finally said, unable to contain my bitterness. Maybe you're similar, maybe not. I feel like our entire life together has been a lie. The only question is, how much of a lie? I stood up and left, heading upstairs to our home office. I began examining the contents of Green's phone. Alice's phone had received numerous calls from him over the past 2 months, all in the evenings. No need to call during work hours. There were also texts discussing lunch. They seemed to dine together about twice a week for 5 weeks. Since Alice worked from home 3 days a week, this meant she had lunch with Green every day she went into the office. I decided to watch the video. It all began when he followed Alice upstairs, her in a short robe. She stepped into the bedroom and promptly flung it off onto the floor. The video momentarily flickered as he positioned the phone on the dresser, focusing it toward the bed. You look stunning, Alice, just as I always envisioned, he remarked. Thank you, Cy, she replied. Seated on the bed, he shed his shorts and shirt eagerly. I need you right now, he asserted forcefully. Alice reclined on her back, inviting him forward. All right, let's do this. I want it too, she encouraged. He leaped onto the bed, and that's when I burst through the door and struck him. The audio on the video captured a resounding slap followed by his cry. I watched until I grabbed the phone to dial emergency. After viewing the video, I couldn't be certain if Alice was truthful about it. Being their first encounter, perhaps. But undoubtedly, she anticipated being engaged physically with Green. Maybe it would indeed be a one-time occurrence, as she claimed. Yet I harbored doubts. After all, he was her boss. I returned to the living room and informed Alice that I needed to return to work to wrap up things at the office. By then, it was already past 3 in the afternoon. I jogged back, feeling less concerned about Alice's feelings and more consumed by anger. I halted my tasks to research divorce laws in our state. Infidelity was grounds for divorce, although it was rarely invoked. It could be pursued after 6 months of separation with a signed separation and property agreement. However, if one party refused to sign, the process could drag on, possibly for 18 months. I wasn't certain about divorcing Alice, but I was definite about seeking separation. I drafted an agreement outlining our separation terms. We would live apart, manage our finances separately, with each responsible for their own expenses. We agreed to refrain from any carnal relations between us, and, notably, pledged not to engage in carnal activity with others. Violation of this clause would grant the other party the freedom to proceed with divorce swiftly. I printed 3 copies and walked home. Alice was cooking dinner, a simple meal of spaghetti with meat sauce and salad. She wore a tracksuit, no makeup, and looked at me shyly, barefoot. It smells great, I remarked. Thanks. Need any help? She offered. I've got it covered, but if you want carrots in the salad, they're in the fridge. Tim chopped some carrots and added them to the bowl. They ate quietly, accompanied by red wine. Afterward, they washed the dishes together. Let's talk in the living room, Tim suggested, noticing Alice's apprehension. They moved to the living room, where Alice spoke softly. Tim, I want to reiterate how sorry I am. I'm trying to comprehend my mistakes. I've decided to seek professional help. Everything's okay, but I believe we need to separate. I'll find an apartment nearby. You can stay here. I don't feel comfortable staying here. Are you certain? She asked, her voice trembling. Now, I feel so guilty. Do you want a divorce? Are we parting ways? This seems like a step in that direction. However, I haven't made a final decision. I just felt the need for some space to think. That's why I drafted a separation agreement. I handed it to Alice, who read it through, tears streaming down her face, silent tears. "I've already signed it," she said, looking up at me. "Can we wait a few days before finalizing this so I can arrange for my mom to come here?" "Well, I can wait a bit. Let's agree on it. Why don't you take some time and let me know?" "Tim, I'm serious about what I said. I'm seeking counseling. Perhaps you could join if the therapist suggests it." "Maybe. I still love you, Alice, but I'm confused. And incredibly angry. It feels like I'll never be the same." "Me too, but you did it, Tim." Her voice cracked. "The person I thought you were, you're not. You got caught, but you're still the same person. You're just not who I thought you were. Not the woman I loved." With that, she burst into tears, and I made no move to console her. The woman I loved would never do this. "You're not her. Maybe you're similar, maybe not. I feel like our entire life together has been a lie. The only question is how much of a lie." I headed upstairs, gathered my essentials from the master bedroom, enough to last the next day, and relocated to the guest room. The following day was a work day, and I barely slept. Rising early, I dressed and headed to work. I stepped out around 9 a.m. to grab a McMuffin. Surprisingly, I managed to focus on work, sending out several emails and jotting down notes in the judge's office. Once engrossed, Alice slipped from my mind momentarily, perhaps indicating how I might need to navigate our separation. During lunch, I researched apartment rentals and scheduled a viewing for the following morning, Friday, at a place just 2 blocks from work. The day passed swiftly, serving as somewhat of an escape mechanism. Upon reflection, around 5:30 p.m., I secured a 3-bedroom house on lease for 2 months. Though it had been our home for 4 years, it no longer felt like mine. Exiting the treadmill, I entered through the sliding back door, mirroring the previous day's routine. Alice was cooking fish stew, filling the kitchen with its inviting aroma. She was an excellent cook. I greeted her upon entering, and she looked at me. "I made fish stew," she announced. "It smells delicious." "Thank you. I'll change now." As we dined on the stew, Alice mentioned, "My mother will arrive on Saturday. Have you found a place for yourself?" "I might check out the apartment tomorrow," I replied. "We could sign the papers tomorrow evening. I won't be here on Saturday anyway." "It doesn't have to be like this, Tim," she insisted. "I promise you it won't happen again." I sighed earnestly. "Promises can easily be broken," she countered, her gaze steady, devoid of tears. "You're letting your hurt feelings cloud your judgment. What's the wise course here? Ignore your betrayal? It won't happen again, you could try, but don't brush it under the rug." "Forgive?" she whispered, her eyes pleading. I expressed my apology. Whether forgiveness is possible remains uncertain to me. However, I'm certain that I will never forget what I heard, particularly what I witnessed on the video. If you'd like, I can email you a copy. "God, Tim," she began to sob. "I didn't intend to be harsh. I only wanted you to understand what I saw. Perhaps one day you'll forgive me for intruding." With that, she rushed away, ascending the stairs. I tidied everything up and secured a studio apartment with a lovely view of the running track in a small park situated midway between my workplace and our former home. It lacked furnishings. I arranged for a double bed, sofas, and armchairs to be delivered, albeit the expenses were burdensome yet necessary. Contemplating Alice's future employment prospects, I realized I might need to increase financial support if her job situation changed. During lunch, my thoughts meandered through various topics, ultimately leading me to conclude that a reconciliation with Alice was highly improbable. I recalled Michelle Davis, a friend from our workplace with whom I attended college and was briefly involved before I met Alice. Though I chose Alice over her, and she in turn chose a fraternity member over me, we remained in touch as friends. I had perceived Michelle as somewhat fickle, which was reinforced by her brief fling with a fraternity guy. She ended the relationship as swiftly as it began. Michelle pursued law school alongside me and eventually married a fellow student, leading what appeared to be a stable life with a young son and a seemingly secure marriage. This illustrates my skill in understanding people, I thought wryly. I dialed her number. "Shelley, it's Tim." "Damn, Tim, what's up? I heard you confronted Green?" "Not my doing. Self-defense." "Tim, I'm free for lunch." Agreed. It was just a couple of hours away. At the restaurant, we hugged, settled in, and placed our orders. "So, spill it," she said. I confided in her, recognizing her as someone I still trusted. After recounting my tale, she revealed, "I've heard chatter about Simon Green. Rumors suggest he's spiraling and might be headed for divorce. There's talk that Alice is involved with him." I found that hard to believe. "What else did you hear? What did you witness?" "Casual lunches, office encounters. The rest was just speculation." "He's changing," she said. "Green, I mean. Seems like he's always on the hunt now. The office gossip is all about it. So Alice isn't the only one he's after? Maybe not, but she seems like a top target. They're together every day. No offense, but why didn't you tell me? I thought about it, but I figured she wouldn't make a move, and reaching out to you could stir up trouble. What's your plan? I've rented a place and drafted a separation agreement, 6 months, but I'm unsure. Did you talk to her at least? What's the point? She's already apologized and promised not to repeat it. Or so what? It's a tough situation. Yeah. How are things with you, Big Bill and Little Will? Little Will's doing great. He's 3 now, full of energy, starting preschool soon, and, oh, Tim, you don't have to listen to my issues. Yours are heavier. I could use a break. I'll help if I can, though. Is something up? Nothing major. Bill's away a lot for work. When he's back, he's distant, not like before. Hearing about Alice makes me think. I've decided to take action. Shelley, what do you think? Should I investigate a bit? He's a good guy, family and all, but I need reassurance. Just talk to him. You both know how. Work it out. Express your concerns. I'm anxious about it. He might see it as a lack of trust. Then be gentle, diplomatic perhaps. Thanks. I hope both you and Alice pull through. We weren't friends in school for reasons you know. Still, I thought she was good for you. After lunch, we hugged and parted ways. I hoped Shelley would stay safe. I heard Alice was back at work, which was a relief. She hadn't been fired. I was increasingly sure that it was the end for Alice and me. We were solely committed to each other, with no kids. She didn't hold up her end of the deal, so it was over. I didn't want to start fresh with new responsibilities. It was a sad realization, but it felt right. Since I moved last Saturday, I haven't contacted Alice. It's been a week. She left 3 voicemails asking to talk, but I never responded. She texted that she's on probation at work, but still employed. I strolled by the house the next Saturday afternoon, heading straight to the patio door and knocked. Tess, Alice's mother, was in the kitchen and opened the door. Upon seeing me, she said, "Hey Tim, is Alice here? She's out. She'll be back soon." Look, Tess, Alice is really confused about everything. Have you made any decisions? I just wanted to talk to Alice. Tess, where'd she go? Tess seemed a bit flustered. She's with a friend. Tess, you're not fooling anyone. Or who's the friend? Did she stay here or somewhere else? Tim, she wasn't doing well. A friend came by and they went out to eat. Tess, was that dinner last night? You can't keep this from me. I noticed she was blocking the kitchen door on purpose. I headed toward the front door, and a new Mustang pulled up, driven by a blonde guy. He got out, circled the car, and opened the passenger door for Alice, who looked ready for a date. I rushed over. "Hey, Alice, I came to see you." She spun around, shocked. The guy appeared uneasy and concerned. "Timmy, this is James from work. He drove me last night." I remained composed, but there was an edge to my voice that seemed to unsettle them both. James started to retreat. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble. I was just trying to help. Cut the act. You got what you wanted. Stick around, and you'll get more than you bargained for." He was my height and younger, and I noticed him stand taller, clearly upset. Alice yelled, "Stop! Just stop, James. It's time for you to go." "Sure thing, Alice," he replied, with emphasis on you. He chuckled, quickly got back in his car, and drove off. I looked at Alice. "You didn't even last a week without breaking the agreement about no lovemaking. I'll bring this up when the papers are ready for you to be served." "Tim, I'm sorry. I was vulnerable and knew we were broken up, but I do love you, even if it doesn't seem like it." "You just needed some sex, didn't you? What happened to you?" "We don't need to talk anymore. Get a lawyer." I turned and walked away, taking the path around the back to go home. It was a straightforward decision, though I was taken aback. We'd been together a long time without any of this. She was attractive, and men probably noticed her often. I wondered why she'd started giving in to them now. Heading back to my room, I decided it might always remain a mystery, or maybe I'd ask her mom. I managed to catch Tess alone about a week after my last visit. I slipped into the house when Alice was likely at work and knocked on the patio door. Tess let me in. "Why are you here, Tim?" I wanted to understand what happened if possible. We were doing great and then she changed. Any idea why? Perhaps she struggled with self-esteem growing up. She wasn't seen as attractive by boys throughout high school. She was flat-chested and thin. Her 2 friends developed faster, becoming popular cheerleaders. Alice lagged behind in popularity and drifted from them. But at 17, she changed, filled out in all the right places, and her acne cleared up. Suddenly, boys noticed her. She went to prom with a football player, lost her virginity at 18, and that summer was wild, going out with friends and boyfriends. I worried about pregnancy, but she used birth control as far as I know. She stayed healthy. I explained, however, in college when we met, she didn't seem overly eager sexually. She seemed normal, but was more experienced than me. She was clear about her likes and desires. Since we started dating, she's been faithful. Tess paused, then asked, "You were discussing having children?" "Yes, we planned to start a family, but that's over now." Maybe she feared that getting pregnant would make her less appealing to men. I think she reached out to her boss because he was pursuing her, and she needed reassurance. That's my best guess. But what about the guy with the Mustang? Same reason. A young guy with a fancy car made her feel desired. But she already knew that. She might not end up married or have children for me. Yes, don't know. Maybe she was just craving excitement. "How long will you be around?" "Not too long. Take care, Tess." I departed. The divorce proceeded smoothly. Alice moved out of our rented place to another apartment across town, closer to her job. We lost touch after the divorce hearing. As we were leaving the courthouse, Alice approached me. "Let's grab lunch, Tim," she said. "Actually, I'll treat. There's something I need to say." "All right." We chose Red Lobster. I had an appetizer, she had soup, and she looked at me after we ordered. "Tim, I messed up. I've seen a therapist. She thinks I was scared of having kids, but I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just not cut out for commitment. I was really attracted to Simon. Sorry, I might never understand myself. What happened to him anyway?" I never heard anything after that. "He's back to working part-time, using a cane in his right hand sparingly, and his wife left him. Good for her." "That seems harsh. You really messed up his life. You and he messed up mine too. But maybe not as badly as you messed up your own life. By the way, how are you?" "I miss our life together. Now I can be as sexually active as I want with most guys I meet, and I really enjoy it. It gets me excited and eager. I feel the need to act on it. I'm not sure why this urge has returned. Simon reminded me of the guy from prom who took my virginity. Maybe I wanted to relive those youthful times. And now you can enjoy them. You can seek pleasure in lovemaking." "That's harsh," but she chuckled. "It wasn't meant to be funny, but I saw the irony and laughed along." She added, "A new guy always gets me going." Pausing, she continued, "But honestly, I miss our family life. I haven't found anyone better in bed than you. Maybe one was just as good and he's bigger, but we knew each other so well. You always satisfied me completely. I was foolish." I sighed. Our talk about her promiscuous behavior had me on edge. I didn't hide it well, and she noticed. "You still find me attractive, Tim? I'm always here for you." She started singing, "Just call my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running to see you again." She smiled at me. "Oh, Alice." I was torn. Alice was the most attractive woman to me, more than anyone else I'd ever known. Our waitress brought our food. Alice quickly put down $30. "We need to go now." I stood, and both Alice and Gwen, our waitress, glanced at my lap. Alice blushed, and Gwen, whose name tag read Gwen, blushed too, briefly looking puzzled before breaking into a smile. "I see you two need some time alone," Gwen said, looking at me. "Come back later, big guy." Alice grabbed my hand, shooting Gwen an annoyed look, and pulled me outside. Her apartment was a short walk away. We entered the building, took the elevator up, and as soon as the doors closed, Alice kissed me passionately, pressing me against the wall. She ran her hands over me. "This is going to be amazing, Tim," she whispered. "Okay." I was out of breath. The elevator door opened to reveal two women as Alice and I stepped out. They looked shocked. We hurried past. One greeted, "Hey, Alice." Alice didn't respond. She ushered me into her apartment, and I nearly tripped over an end table. We quickly undressed. Stepping back, she scanned me, and I did the same. She licked her lips. "I told you I'd pin you down," she teased. Our encounter was brief but intense. We both felt satisfied afterward. We lay together, catching our breath. Maybe I should have considered how strange it was to climax on the day of our divorce, but that's for later. Alice mused, sitting up and looking at me. "That was the best lovemaking we've ever had." "The best I've ever had. I should have left you sooner." I felt aroused again. We had passionate, prolonged lovemaking. She reached climax multiple times, just like the best moments in our marriage. Then I reached my peak, which was as intense and satisfying as the first time. This time, I rolled away from her. I thought staying would lead to more activity, potentially damaging my health. The divorce was finalized that morning, and Alice and I continued our activities until late at night. We had a light meal. I suggested returning to Red Lobster, but she declined, saying we had soup in the fridge. We didn't bother dressing to eat. After finishing her cake, she looked at me. "Should we talk or keep going?" Without hesitation, I stood, took her hand, and said, "Let's go." We repeated this several times, all of which were incredible. Some encounters were slow, some intense. We both knew each other's triggers. Sometimes it felt like a battle to see who could make the other give in. Neither of us won, but it was thrilling. The next morning, we were engaged physically again before she made breakfast. As we ate, I felt we needed to discuss our situation. "Alice, I hope we can maintain this," I said. "Timmy, I realize now that marrying was a mistake," she responded. "I tried to keep my promise to be faithful, but I've learned I can't. That doesn't mean I want you out of my life." I wasn't joking when I referenced the James Taylor song. "But there will come a time, Alice, when I'll want to settle down and have kids. Maybe that's what led you to other men." "So? I enjoy being with you sexually, you're the best, and you'll likely remain the best I've ever had. I believe we could continue this until one of us decides to stop." She concurred. Over the weekend we stayed in bed, taking short breaks only to eat, shower, and use the bathroom. On Saturday afternoon there was a knock at the door. Alice donned her robe and answered it. It was the woman from the elevator, Maisie. She was older but looked good. "Alice, I haven't seen you in a while. I just wanted to make sure you're okay," Maisie said. "I'm doing quite well, Maisie," Alice responded. "Very well, actually." She smiled at me and Maisie glanced over too. "I get it. Enjoy yourself. You're fortunate, Alice. I won't worry anymore." "Thanks." Alice closed the door softly and giggled. "You really gave her a good view." "Maybe you should have invited her in for coffee. She might have liked it with cream," I teased. "I can't let that happen. Too much cholesterol," she retorted, pulling off my shorts. On Monday, we both returned to work without resolving anything. All day, I mulled over our situation. I'd never consider a lasting relationship with Alice. We couldn't form a real partnership. However, as long as our chemistry was strong, I was willing to continue until I found someone I wanted to marry and start a family with. I'd tread carefully. Alice had taught me a tough lesson. Still, I desired a family and kids. I was cautious, unlike Alice, who had multiple partners, including 3 others besides me. We weren't committed, and it didn't bother me. Actually, the idea of her being promiscuous was somewhat exciting. I made sure to get tested regularly for STDs, and all results were negative, by the way. I ran into Maisie after leaving Alice's one day. We had a brief encounter, I confessed. Maisie gave me a knowing look. "Hey there, I remember you, and you certainly left an impression," Maisie remarked. "I recall you too, Maisie. Alice mentioned you're divorced," I said. "Yes, it's been a year and a half. Being single at my age isn't easy." "You look fantastic, no matter your age. Care to invite me in?" "I'm certain about it." "You're Tim, aren't you?" Maisie inquired. "That's me," I confirmed. We headed up to the 4th floor, where Maisie's apartment was directly across from Alice's. As we reached Maisie's door, Alice emerged from hers, spotting us, and bursting into laughter. "You're quite the catch, Tim." "I never would have guessed when we were married," Alice commented, glancing at Maisie. "Enjoy yourself, Maisie. Tim's quite the catch." With that, she sauntered off gracefully. Though Maisie showed interest in both Alice and me, she first led me to a well-furnished bedroom. Maisie was 40 with a college-age son and a daughter working downtown. She was skilled in intimacy, and I genuinely enjoyed our time together. I departed the next morning, promising to stay in touch, a promise I kept. I truly enjoyed my time with her. Curiosity piqued about the other women on the 4th floor, but I never got around to meeting them. One day, while passing the courthouse, a woman approached me and said, "We've never met before." She seemed puzzled. I recognized her, Gwen, the waitress from Red Lobster. "You're Gwen, right? You served us when we dined there." "Ah, now I remember. It's odd I forgot, but I didn't really see your face then." "I'm Tim. Are you still at the restaurant?" "Part-time. I also do some modeling." Gwen was an attractive blonde with a slender figure, well-defined hips, and blue eyes. I recalled she mentioned meeting up at 6, but Alice and I spent the whole weekend together. Are you two back together?" she inquired. "No. That day we met you was right after our divorce was finalized in court. It seemed to reinvigorate us, as you observed," I clarified. "That's odd. Are you two still seeing each other?" "Dating? We're compatible in some ways, but not in others," I replied. She smiled. "Maybe you should take me out sometime. I'm off today." "I like the sound of that. How about dinner at my place tonight?" "I'll cook," I suggested. "Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it, Tim." That evening, she arrived around 6:30, looking stunning in a chic evening dress and sandals. I prepared fried chicken and rice for dinner, and we had a good conversation. She was 25, juggling work as a model for various clothing magazines and as a waitress. While she wasn't married, she had ended a long-term relationship about 10 months prior. At that time, I was 34, working at a successful law firm and living independently with a good car. I had separate relationships with Alice, Maisie, and a woman from the courthouse. But I was ready for commitment and found Gwen appealing. I decided to pursue a relationship with her and see where it went. On our first night out, we agreed I'd drive her home, and she kissed me at her doorstep. While I was thrilled, she didn't immediately take things to the bedroom. As our relationship progressed, I found myself falling for her. She was both attractive and intelligent, and I believed she felt the same way about me. By our third date, we became engaged physically. It was a beautiful experience. I felt a connection, and she seemed to appreciate it. That night, I decided to end things with the other women I'd been seeing. A few weeks later, after a particularly intense intimate encounter with Gwen, she revealed she enjoys rougher experiences at times, something we both liked, as do many others, I assumed. Gwen, I've shared about my past marriage and its issues, but now I think I'm in love with you, I admitted. I've stopped seeing other women. I'm glad to hear that. Since meeting you, you're the only guy I've dated. I haven't even kissed anyone else. I really love you, Tim, but I'm concerned about your trust issues regarding fidelity. Will you always have doubts about me? If I commit to being only with you, I'll stick to it, she asked. I'd be dishonest if I said I wasn't concerned. But if you assure me, I'll do everything I can to address my trust issues. All right, it's a deal. I'll remain faithful, and you will too. That works, I agreed. 2 weeks later, I proposed, and we tied the knot 3 months after that. While her parents lived in Chicago, we chose to have the ceremony locally. It was modest. I invited Alice and Maisie. I introduced Gwen to Alice shortly after proposing. Alice was cordial, but I could tell she felt a bit downcast. Our connection wasn't based on love, but I knew she'd miss our intimate moments. I would have felt the same way. Gwen and I chose the Bahamas for our honeymoon, which was fantastic. Afterward, we moved into my apartment, and things went smoothly. We soon decided to start a family, and were blessed with 2 children in 3 years, Thomas and Eileen. I became a partner at my firm and purchased a house in a nearby suburb. I stayed in touch with Alice, not the one I'd been intimate with. She married a coworker named Larry Gibson. A year after Gwen, and I tied the knot. He was successful, and she had 2 sons, Lawrence and Raymond. They relocated near Gwen and me, and the 4 of us often crossed paths. Our kids even attended the same preschool. Gwen and Alice became friends, though Larry seemed wary of me. I sensed he doubted my intentions around Alice, and he was correct. There was still an attraction between us. Gwen recognized it too, but trusted me completely, even growing to trust Alice not to encroach on our relationship. However, Larry, who sometimes noticed the chemistry between Alice and me, remained uneasy. Despite this, Larry and I shared interests, particularly baseball. We played together on a men's team in an old-timers league and excelled. We also had season tickets for MLB games, both being avid fans. Occasionally, Larry and I attended games together. One day, while waiting to exit the garage at Gems Park, I decided to have a candid conversation with him about my past relationship with Alice. After the game, I approached Larry. I want to be clear, I'll never have a physical relationship with Alice again. We're both married now. I can see this bothers you, I admitted. Tim, that's a direct way to put it. We could be good friends if you trusted Alice and me, but it's clear you two still have lingering feelings, he replied frankly. There's a history, sure. We were compatible. But I promise you, and I'm sure Alice has said the same, we need to put this behind us. Tim, whenever I see you two together, like at the club dance last month, it seems like you shared some incredible moments, he said. Sometimes I wonder who she's thinking of when we're intimate, me, you, or some movie star, he added. Do you ever think of her when you're with Gwen? He asked. Not usually, but I won't deny she crosses my mind. We had some great times, maybe even better ones than I've had since, I confessed. That's what truly concerns me, Larry said. Larry, I see your point. I hadn't thought of it that way. Thanks for sharing, I responded, making our conversation easier for all involved. However, I wasn't entirely truthful. The closeness I had with Alice post-divorce was unparalleled. It still crosses my mind, especially when I see her, and I suspect she feels the same. Maybe if we're both in our 80s and circumstances change, we'll see if we can rekindle that passion. My cheating destroyed my marriage. I regret it deeply, but now my husband is out for revenge. Oh no, I need to call the police. What were they thinking? I got attacked by a woman around 35 years old, wearing a hat and dark glasses. Can you guess her age? That's the best description I could manage. I'm having a hard time understanding this. Let me start from the beginning. Maybe it will make more sense. I'm hoping that by writing everything down, I can figure something out. The shock of being attacked without reason in public is so different from anything I've experienced before. I just can't wrap my head around it. Just a few hours ago, life was great. I had a wonderful life, a beautiful home, money in the bank, and a husband who adored me. But that's not why I was so happy leaving the office on Monday. It was for a more private reason. My husband was away on business, and I had plans with my lover, John, when I got home. John is a recent addition to my life, and he's taken me to new places in bed. That's why I was walking to my car with a smile on my face. As I approached, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Hoping it was John, I turned around, only to be met with a fist to my face from an angry woman. I barely had time to see her face before falling to the ground, letting her kick me in the back without a word. Eventually, she left, and fearing she might return, I called for help. The ambulance took me to the hospital. I arrived before the night rush, so I passed out a bit and was quickly attended to. Besides a split lip and some bruises, I was okay. They warned me about delayed concussion symptoms and told me to ice the bruises before sending me home. The police questioned me, but with a vague description of a slender blonde woman in a hat and dark glasses. Catching her seemed unlikely. I couldn't even tell if she was a natural blonde or give a reason for the attack. I asked the police for a ride back to my car, but they said it was against the rules. I tried to put on a smile, but my lip hurt too much. Attempting to call John for a ride failed, so I had to call a taxi. My new plan for the evening was painkillers, maybe vodka, ice for the bruises, and a long bath until it was time to call my husband. He always knew how to help me make sense of things and make me laugh when I was sad. I wouldn't be surprised if he dropped everything and drove 4 hours home after hearing what happened. I guess I was always his priority. I had only been home for about half an hour. The bathtub was full, and the ice was cooling my martini when there was a knock on the door. Thinking it was the Chinese takeout I ordered, I opened the door. The next thing I knew, I had vague memories, and as I tried to sit up, my head hurt terribly. Something had dried on my face. Scratching a bit, I found blood under my fingernail. Panic set in as I felt my entire face gently. Thankfully, my nose wasn't broken, but my cheek was, and I had a black eye. Turning my head slowly, I saw dried. Blood spatters on the floor. Continuing my inspection, I found a lump on the back of my head and a bruise, likely from hitting the floor. Despite the pain, I straightened up. Hallucinations and flashes of images played in my mind. I distinctly saw a stocky woman with long black hair and almost bushy eyebrows, her face hidden by a scarf. That's all I saw, except for a wooden handle or bat flying toward my eyes. I woke up embarrassed, still on the couch. The clock showed 5 a.m., and I had a terrible headache. Every movement felt like a bowling ball hitting the walls inside my skull. As I staggered into the kitchen, I felt pain in my groin. The attacker must have kicked me there. I swallowed 2 painkillers and staggered to the bathroom. The mirror revealed an unpleasant sight. Whatever they slammed me with, my nose was okay, but my cheek was broken, and I had a black eye. Who are these people? This woman, and the one from this afternoon, what's going on? I didn't think I had any enemies, even though I'm a real estate agent. I wondered if I should call more than one ambulance, but decided against it. Yesterday afternoon, the doctor advised me to watch for delayed concussion for 8 hours. It's been longer since I got drubbed the second time. I also thought about calling the police, but chose not to. Our front door wasn't visible from the hotel grounds, and I had less information to provide than last time. One woman accidentally attacking me is one thing, but 2 is just weird. Despite the late hour, I decided to call Dave. He would know what to do. Oh no, Dave. What did he think when he tried to call me last night like he always did, and I didn't answer? He would try calling my cell phone and home phone and then ask where I was. I hope this didn't make him think I was sneaking out of the house when he wasn't here. I've always been incredibly careful in my dealings. Wouldn't it be ironic if a false tip gave me away? Taking my mobile phone, I checked how many missed calls there were from my husband. Strange, but there were none. I picked up my home phone and dialed the number to get a list of my latest actions. The last unanswered call was made 3 days ago. I couldn't remember the last time Dave didn't talk to me when he was gone. In fact, it was part of my safety net that I would routinely call him on his hotel phone, citing the supposed dangers of using a cell phone too much before going to meet my lover at a motel or, on very rare occasions, inviting him out here. This reminded me that I had called John on my cell phone the previous afternoon and had not yet deleted the record. I wasn't stupid enough to store his number in my phone. Without a trace, there was no evidence. There were several photos on it that should never have seen the light of day, but my phone was the only place they were kept, and they were hidden there. I also made sure it wasn't locked with a regular password or one of those boilerplate items, just my fingerprint. And a huge, strong password. Dave thinks it's a work requirement not to share my password. On the rare occasions when he needed to use my phone, I opened it for him and never let it out of my sight. I decided it was safer to store the photos on my phone that I can protect than any other media that could be discovered. I deleted the call to John, left a message in his message bank, and noted that he also did not answer my previous call. I'm surprised Dave didn't call. Despite the early hour, I called him. I really needed to hear his comforting voice. The call went straight to the message bank, which was weird. Maybe he lost his charger and his battery died or something. This wasn't the first time. By this time, it was already after 5 in the morning, and I had a showing. There was no way I could show up looking like I did now, so I put on more makeup than usual to cover it up. After all, I had a whole arsenal. I should probably explain this. You see, all through high school, I was very ordinary. You've all met those who watched from the sidelines as all the boys worth their salt ignored them to go after the athletic, popular, bright girls. Although I was proud that I was not like some other plain ones, they exposed themselves to everyone, mistakenly believing that being popular meant they had succeeded. Thus, I hadn't any relationship when I left school at 16. My parents were not overly ambitious toward me and were happy to support me as I attended a series of evening courses to gain some administrative qualifications while I worked as a waitress in my spare time. I lost my purity to someone who, I realized too late, was a smart carnivore. I realized this the next morning after a quick, not-so-convenient closeness in his hotel room when he asked me to leave. I chalked it up to experience and thought that this episode had made me an expert at choosing carnivores. That did not happen. My next 2 closeness encounters ended just as disastrously. The one after them was a guy with less experience than me. Here, I already left him after the first night. This is how I sailed through life until I was 20. That's when Dave came into my life. Dave was a year ahead of me in school and seemed to be my male equivalent. He was tall and thin, but nothing else about him was striking. We got to talking at the restaurant where I worked, where he invited several clients to lunch. After the first meeting, I learned enough to understand that he was a man with a clear career plan and determination to get things done. I accepted the date, and the rest, as they say, is history. I hooked up with him about 2 weeks after meeting, and it was clear we were both new to this, making it awkward. We were both open to learning and used each other for that. If I had to describe my life a year before he turned 21, I'd say it was good. I had a boyfriend who was growing and clearly loved me. We weren't invited to fancy events, but we didn't mind. We moved into an apartment, and I was taking a real estate course paid for by Dave. When my crucial birthday came, Dave celebrated his first big bonus by treating me. I got my own car, a voucher for 2 days with a beauty consultant, and a bigger engagement ring than I expected. I said yes, drove the car, and delayed using the voucher. Oh, I wish I could tear up that voucher. Then I could have a husband with his phone on and a face without bruises. Dave reminded me about the voucher, but I was busy planning a simple wedding. We didn't have many friends. In the end, I decided to use it for a little treat for myself before the big day. That's when I found out it was for 2 days with Caroline, an elegant woman in her 30s. I don't know what qualities she had, but she knew how to showcase femininity. Our first stop was a hairdresser, where I had a major makeover. I have to admit, I was nervous about how it would turn out. The rest of that first day was spent shopping. Caroline took me to upscale stores, and later that evening she used my phone to ask Dave to update my credit card. At the end of the day, looking in the mirror at my new hairstyle and clothes, I almost called Caroline to tell her not to worry. The next day, the hairstyle and clothes truly made me beautiful. The following day at the salon, I got pampered with a pedicure, manicure, facial, and scalp massage. Then I met Colin, who claimed to be more fun than a tree full of monkeys and, if you believe him, used to be a beautician for some famous stars. He and Caroline transformed my face over the next 2 hours, including some corrections. I wasn't allowed to look until they said I was perfect. When I saw my reflection, I involuntarily took a step back. That's when Caroline's true genius emerged. The clothes and hairstyle that seemed out of place before now framed a face that I had to admit was beautiful. I couldn't believe it. The change was stunning. Caroline made me look up from admiring myself for Colin's 2-hour lecture on how he uncovered the natural masterpiece that was me. I thanked him and Caroline for this life-changing experience. If I had known how it would actually affect me, I might have been shocked. Dave did a funny double-take when I got home but quickly recovered, telling me it just showed me as he always saw me. That night was the wildest in bed, and 3 days later, we were married. The honeymoon was confusing. Men and handsome guys who never paid me attention were now vying to dance with me. I humored them when Dave didn't mind. He was the first to admit that dancing wasn't his favorite. Despite all the attention, it still didn't hit me that the game had changed. This realization started when the wedding photo album arrived. I saw that I was absolutely stunning, and for the first time, I felt that I had married a man a bit shorter than me, noticeable in various settings. I probably feel this way deep down even today, which is neither logical nor fair. What have I achieved in the 5 years since my marriage compared to Dave? He built his business and was on his way to becoming a millionaire. I used my looks to sell real estate. Despite the unequal success, for some reason I felt superior. 5 years later, after revealing my true self, I became popular, praised, entitled, and, within 6 months, an unfaithful wife. In my defense, resisting temptation was extremely difficult. Suddenly, my mind, which believed my body was a 5 out of 10, was pursued by men who were 9 out of 10. It took waking up with a third such man for me to realize they were just more attractive versions of the carnivore who took my honor. From that point on, I had complete control in choosing my partners. Now, with my bruised face, I decided to put on a good layer of concealer and foundation. Feeling sorry for myself, I attempted to call Dave every 15 minutes, but had no luck. It took an hour and a half of layering until I managed to hide everything to my satisfaction. Unfortunately, I had no success in communicating with my husband or explaining the strange behavior of the two women. To ease my loneliness, I made coffee and drank it, feeling more alone than I had in years. Making friends with women was always a challenge for me, and with Dave's unresponsiveness, I found myself isolated in my darkest hour. With an hour to spare, I texted John to call me when he could, then occupied myself with meaningless content in my inbox until it was time to leave for the office. Carrying the laptop bag and luxury briefcase Dave bought me last year to my car in the detached garage, I placed them in the back seat. Slamming the door, I turned to the driver's door, and unexpectedly, she was standing right in front of me. As I turned away from the back door of my car, I can only assume she must have been hiding behind the garage wall or somewhere else. When I re-entered, the incident happened so quickly that it was hard to recall how it ended. I remember falling to the ground, feeling someone's foot step on my hands, which I instinctively raised to protect my face. The blows eventually stopped and I ran toward the house. The brutality of the attack was utterly shocking, and my face was burning. Leaning briefly against the door, I stumbled toward the downstairs bathroom. The mirror revealed 3 long scratches on my left cheek and 2 on my right, apparently caused by raking fingernails. My right arm and forearm hurt, but fortunately nothing was broken. I called the police again, then Dave and John. While I waited for the cops to arrive, no one answered. I felt so alone. The office called just after 9, questioning why I had abandoned the client. They only calmed down a bit when I explained the attack. While working for a real estate company, the police were of little help, and it seemed like the media stink thought I was wasting their time with vague descriptions. They interviewed neighbors and asked if I needed an ambulance. I didn't. I needed my husband to answer my call. In complete confusion, I closed the door behind the cops, walked into the living room, and yelled at the photo on the mantel where Dave and I were standing. "Next time, you'll take your phone charger, Dave, even if I have to pack it for you myself." An attack by one random woman wasn't unusual. 2 was statistically unlikely, but 3 was almost impossible. So, it was time for me to carefully consider the possible reasons why I had so many enemies. Unfortunately, I couldn't think of anything. This time, makeup couldn't conceal the scratches. To worsen matters, I had to remove the earlier applied creams with a makeup remover pad to apply a little disinfectant to my new scratches. It's unknown what kind of microbes this psychopath had under her nails. The scratches burned intensely, and the disinfectant felt like I'd poured gasoline on my skin. The task was made even more difficult by the fact that my right arm was starting to feel raw and bruised. By the end, my face was red and blotchy, and the last attacker must have been wearing heels or something, as bruises appeared on my arms and forearms in distinct forms. I called Dave again, eager to hear his voice, but the call went to voicemail once more. Frustrated, I considered sending him an email, hoping he'd hurry home when he read it. The issue was my laptop in the car. Walking down the stairs awkwardly like a 90-year-old, I couldn't ignore the noticeable bruises on my lower back, legs, and groin. Trying to turn the bolt on the front door, fear held me back. I scolded myself for cowardice. Remembering real estate seminars, I gave myself a pep talk. The motivation behind the beatings was a mystery, but after the 3 women took out their anger on me, it seemed like a case of mistaken identity, or so I thought. Now, thinking logically, I considered viewing the garage from the back door to surprise and ambush someone. Walking from room to room, checking windows and the route to the garage, I realized there were blind spots. The secluded backyard left me vulnerable without witnesses. My phone rang. "Dave, finally!" I rushed toward it, ignoring the protest of my bruised and battered limbs. I was disappointed. It wasn't Dave. It was my office, arranging a meeting with a client at a hotel in minutes. Excuses about being injured fell on deaf ears. They were working lean, and if I couldn't handle it, they made it clear they could find a replacement. The challenge remained, getting to my car safely. A light bulb went on, I'd call a taxi. I did just that, giving very specific instructions about parking in the middle of the driveway, where I could see everything from the house. After all, there could be someone hiding behind the garage or behind the hedge on the property line. But of course, with the taxi driver as a witness, I would be safe. While waiting for the taxi, I did everything I could for my face. 10 minutes later, the taxi horn prompted me to make one last visual check outside and then an awkward dash to the safety of the taxi. I didn't really relax until we were a block away from home. The driver was a woman, which worried me, but after she asked where I was going, she lost interest in me. 15 minutes later, nearing our destination, I realized that I had made a terrible mistake. My house keys were in my briefcase in the back seat of my car parked in the garage. Ordering the taxi back would make me at least 25 minutes late for the meeting, and the client might well be very indignant at being set up a second time and demand my head from the agency. I decided to somehow get through the scheduled meeting. I could show the client the exterior and report some bureaucratic mistakes with the keys. I'd almost certainly miss the sale, but hopefully I wouldn't get fired. I called Dave again before reaching home. Waiting half an hour for the client, who arrived by taxi, I saw that she was a tall, dark-haired woman, around 30, quite pretty, except for the eyes hidden behind dark glasses. Carrying a trendy, huge bag, she looked at a paper, then walked toward me. She seemed to shrug while following my excuse for the key fiasco, but looked irritated when I explained that the best thing I could suggest was to walk. Outside, looking in the windows. Luckily, I knew everything about the property by heart, so I didn't have to refer to any notes, also left in the briefcase. I knew in my heart that if this house didn't sell quickly, the owners might lower the price enough for Dave and me to buy it. It was a beautiful green area populated by young urban professionals. Dave and I would fit in perfectly here. We walked out into the backyard, where I pointed out a spacious art studio located separate from the main house. After I finished listing its features, I walked over to the master bedroom window and peered through the gap in the curtains to see how good the view was. I heard an inappropriate sound behind me. Looking back, I would describe it as a clicking sound. I turned and noticed the client holding a telescopic baton, one of those self-defense tools often advertised in women's magazines. Her cute expression turned into one of distorted hatred. I believe she hissed a bad word before swinging the baton forcefully at my head. The blow hit my hastily raised forearms, causing excruciating pain, and I actually heard a bone crack. I think the woman in her furious state heard it too. Her anger seemed to fade as she stood there watching me scream, lowering my hand as the pain overwhelmed me. However, some residual anger remained, and she struck the side of my head. I absorbed most of the blow with my undamaged hand, but it still knocked me to the ground. When I came to, the wild woman was gone, leaving me completely alone. Even though she disappeared, something fell from her purse when she pulled out the baton, a piece of paper that I saw her stuff into her bag. When I examined it, I found a photograph about a size lying face up on the ground. It was a familiar image, one of my favorites. I was perplexed about how this crazy woman got a copy. It was a selfie I took about 3 months ago, capturing an intimate moment with John. My phone was in my outstretched hand when I took the photo. Despite everything, I had the strength at that moment to press the button, and the excellent framing was purely luck. Recalling the crummy motel room we paid cash for, John and I, eager after weeks without intimacy, engaged in dirty and rough closeness. Despite the roughness, I experienced incredible, previously unknown pleasure. This photograph became the means by which the woman identified me, leading me to guess she might be Mrs. John, judging by her anger. I never inquired about John's wife, just as we never discussed Dave. I didn't consider it important enough to think about. Holding my damaged hand, I rolled into a sitting position. I didn't debate internally about calling an ambulance this time, I did. However, I avoided police involvement to prevent exposing my affairs, which could lead to Dave finding out and result in something terrible. The question of how John's baton-wielding wife got her hands on this photo occupied my mind as I staggered to meet the ambulance. I had never shared this photo with anyone or any other device, not even with John. Was my phone hacked? At the hospital, it was the same triage nurse, ready to call the police. I talked her out of it, convincing her it was an accident. Despite her disbelief, she respected my wishes after I vigorously shook my head when she inquired about my husband. They set my arm, administered strong painkillers, and then ushered me into a taxi. The considerate taxi driver took me straight to my front door, waiting until I entered and locked the door from inside. Against the doctor's recommendations, I washed down the painkillers with a large, very large shot of vodka while simultaneously concocting a story to tell my husband. I left him numerous confused and worried messages that he'll discover when he charges his phone. My attempt to call him again failed, so I remembered my idea to send him an email. Since my laptop was in the car and it was already dark, I wasn't going to take any more chances with another potential attack. Then I recalled our old desktop computer, which we used before getting laptops, and which Dave continued to use occasionally. I turned it on and went to pour myself some vodka. When I returned, there was a small spinning hourglass on the screen, and under it, the word sync. Sync? What syncing? I responded to the call of nature, which took a while. Ever tried unzipping your pants side zipper with one arm in a sling? When I returned to the office, the computer had finished syncing, whatever it was syncing with, and what was displayed on the screen was terrible. Well, that clarified everything. Everything. Who were these awful women, and why did they do what they did? Oddly, this knowledge provided some comfort after the complete confusion of the past 24 hours. What the screensaver showed on our old home computer explained much more. It became clear why, for the first time in forever, my husband didn't call me during his business trip, why he didn't answer the calls, why he might never call me again, how I was considered an arrogant person and probably lost the rest of my life. I barely made it to the bathroom when I painfully vomited. Touching the tender left side of my face, I felt the purple bruise and scratches on the right. Before leaving the bathroom, I turned off the monitor displaying disgusting, destructive photos on the screensaver of a computer I hardly ever used. It displayed the contents of my phone, more precisely the photographs on it. They flashed on the computer screen, changing approximately every 10 seconds. Strangely enough, photographs of houses or specific interior elements were interspersed with much more graphic photographs. I recalled how, a couple of weeks ago, my boss hired a tech company to update our phones. I watched like a hawk while the technician played with mine. Now, it was obvious that at least one of these changes resulted in the photos I had so carefully hidden on it being transferred to my desktop, along with the rest of my photo folder. And if they could see the desktop of the old computer, could they? Oh no. Dave's laptop was much more modern than the old home computer. A feeling of dread came over me as I imagined Dave looking at the 100 or so trophy photographs. Photographs meant only for my personal pleasure. Photos of me and different men in different poses. Can I imagine Dave capturing photographs of my lovers' faces, printing them, taking them to my work, and comparing the faces to the names in their files with the help of our secretary, who always had a soft spot for him? Unfortunately, yes, I can. Names led to addresses. And wives. Wives who saw the photographs. Wives who, in my case, provided the blows, scrapes, and bruises. After yet another unanswered call to my husband's phone, I struggled upstairs and checked his wardrobe. But what I saw only made my depression worse. Then, ignoring the terrible photos on the old computer screensaver, I turned on the monitor again and logged into our bank's online website. I saw a few tiny numbers where there should have been big ones. I dropped my chin to my chest. The realization of what a spoiled, conniving, entitled person I had become shocked me. The blow was as painful as all my physical injuries combined. Working with both commercial and domestic properties, there was never a shortage of male clients to choose from, and I made a choice. Perhaps in the early days, I tried to be very careful with my lovers. Back then, I had a strict rule: no photos, videos, or any traces. Oh, I did make a few mistakes along the way. I was almost exposed by one guy who wanted to continue the relationship after it had run its course, in my opinion. It was then that I decided to limit myself to married men who had as much to lose as I did. But I calmed down and relaxed some of my rules when it became obvious that Dave trusted me implicitly. Error. Big mistake. Huge. I should have stuck to the no photos rule. I kicked myself for my absolute arrogance, wondering how I could let this happen. I became the popular girl I dreamed of being in school, and somehow had to back up that popularity by sleeping with all the hot men. My mistake was thinking that my marriage could withstand the truth about its real nature. I'm not naive enough to believe that Dave would never discover my affairs. But I had a plan ready for that scenario. One I was confident Dave would accept. I figured he wouldn't easily find a replacement on my level, and ultimately he'd forgive me. My plan hinged on him learning about just one lover. I'd admit my weakness, claim he was a skilled seducer, shed some tears, promise it wouldn't happen again, and then ask him to let me share everything I've kept hidden. As I reflected, I wondered if this was merely a self-preservation tactic, a way to postpone the inevitable realization that Dave had no intention of forgiving me. He didn't catch me in bed with someone else, triggering my rehearsed response. How could I have predicted he'd discover me in intimate spaces with dozens of lovers at the same time?